Allies. Book 4 in the Kaylid Chronicles series. Written by Mel Todd. Narrated by Rebecca Brokaw Sands.
To all those who don't look like anyone else, I searched for you from the other side of the galaxy. Rars Goldwing Learline. Chapter 1. Visitor. With the invasion focusing on densely populated areas, people are fleeing to more remote areas and overloading the infrastructure there. Reports from areas as diverse as Nebraska and Scotland and Iceland mention the sudden influx of people fleeing the attackers. Presence is causing life-threatening issues as the support system can't handle the influx. TNN Invasion News. McKenna kept sneaking glances at the being sitting next to her in the Humvee as they raced back to their headquarters. The president and others needed to be notified, and that could only be done from there. They didn't carry their phones with them. There was too big a risk of it going off at the wrong time, and besides, even with the phone on silent, they made noise when they vibrated. Too much noise. This wasn't a call she wanted to make out here anyway. What is he? Is this a Drakyn? McKenna tried not to stare, even as she asked in the mind space. The weird feeling of someone in her mind had faded, but she could feel everyone's rapt attention on their guest. You could just ask me your questions. I'm here to help both our peoples. The rich, vibrant voice filled the mind space, and it took everything McKenna had to not squeak in surprise. She whipped around to stare at him and noticed Perce and JD doing the same thing. While surprise was hard to read on Kaylid warrior form faces, the echoes of emotion down the mind space let her know they had the same reaction she did. How did you do that? The Humvee drowned out her voice, but the Drakyn tilted his scaly head. You were talking, so I did not think it would be rude to reply. Was it? How can you speak English? Tony blurted out the question, even as McKenna had to brace herself when the Humvee swayed sharply. Some of the soldiers drove the vehicle like it was a sports car. It wasn't, and the bruises proved it, though at least their bruises faded fast. The soldiers weren't so lucky. It would do me little assistance if I could not speak the language of the ones I hoped to offer mutual aid. We obtained examples of your speech, and some of my people have made the effort to learn them. Most were gleaned off your streaming networks. As I speak it and hear it, my own skill becomes more accurate. It is an odd language. There are many conflicting ideas inherent in the words. I think I prefer the ones called Spanish and Italian. They have more of an eloquent sound and flow, almost like music. McKenna checked to make sure her jaw wasn't hanging open. This just seemed too surreal. She wanted to ask so many questions, but the swirl of confusion in the mind space told her she wasn't alone. We four? She had no idea if the stranger could overhear that, too, but almost didn't care. Almost. So she did try to make it private. Yes? The AI's voice had a weird, wary note to it. Is it telling the truth? There is no information on a living Drakyn in accessible databases. Anything you learn will be new information for the databases. In other words, you have no clue and are flying just as blind as we are. That may be another way to put it. The AI almost sounded aggrieved, which was just amusing. A shudder shook the vehicle as it came to a halt. The engine shut off, and the silence seemed a physical thing. Let's get our guest inside, Lawson said. He sounded tense, and McKenna gave him a look. His eyes were wide and skin pale as he stared at the Drakyn, flinching a bit as the dragon man flexed his wings in the confined space. Can we make sure to let people know what we're bringing inside? I really don't want him or us to get shot. McKenna looked at Lawson meaningfully. Lawson stared at her blankly for a moment, then shook himself. Oh, yeah. He stepped out of the vehicle and walked a few steps away, flipping on his radio and talking. McKenna didn't bother to listen. She trusted him after the last week or so, and all of them knew how fragile this hope was. Instead, she focused on the Drakyn, cycling through all the things she wanted to say.
How come you can hear us when we're talking in our minds?
This was Cass, and McKenna got the impression she was waiting on the other side of the door, acting as protection and backup for both sides. I do not understand the question. You are talking. If you did not want me to hear, you would have put it on a private wavelength instead of a public space. The rich voice sounded confused, and his body tilted its head a bit, looking at McKenna. Silent? Public? We four?
There is no information to address your question.
The Drakyn flinched back, his flexible nose wrinkling. What is that? It spoke before. Interesting. When we four spoke just to me, it was private, or he didn't react.
We four, the AI in my head?
Yes. That information had been passed along, though I did not expect a separate intelligence. The Drakyn flexed his wings again, the tight constraints of the vehicle making it an aborted motion. McKenna had a burning need to know what else had been passed along and by whom. How much did this Drakyn know? Okay, you're clear. Guaranteed no one is going to pull a weapon. I talked to Captain Alfonso. He's waiting. We'll call the right peeps. Lawson called back. He sounded a bit calmer. Ready? We have people you need to meet. She glanced at the Drakyn and really wished she had some idea about how to read their facial expressions or body language. All that training we got, and nothing that would be useful now. She ignored the thought that the training had been provided by people who treated these beings as their worst enemy, and they had no idea how accurate some of the details would be. He came out after her, and yes, she knew it was a male, something. Everything about him screamed male. His huge red wings flexed in the open air. McKenna sucked in a breath. There was an aura about him that just took your breath away. Perce and JD followed, and she realized again how huge the Drakyn was. The reds and yellows of his scales reflected light, casting colors on the back wall of the strip mall. The soldier posted there drew in a sharp breath, but didn't move or draw his weapon. McKenna took that as a positive, even if his eyes were wide and breathing rapid. The Drakyn tilted his head, scanning the bland building and the two men looking at him. Your buildings are so blocky. It came out almost as a question, but not quite. McKenna shrugged. It works. There are more varieties in other places. She shifted her attention to Lawson. Alfonso ready for us? Yeah, I don't think he believes, but he's waiting, has the landline connected, and with a dial tone. Lawson replied, looking at the alien standing there. Some of the junction boxes had been taken out, and even cell phone service was spotty, but everyone figured it wouldn't occur to the Elentrin to tap into the landlines. With an odd look on his face, Lawson shook himself and turned, pulling open the door. Let's show off the dragon. McKenna took a steadying breath as the aforementioned dragon tilted his head a bit. I am called a Drakyn, not a dragon. Old name, mythology, stuff like that. I hope it doesn't matter, but expect people to call you that. Probably a lot, McKenna told him, resisting the urge to tell him any more. Oh, the media will have a field day with this when they get a hold of him. As you say. It took him moving sideways through the door to be able to enter, and they walked into a room of people gaping at him.
I knew what you said, but I still didn't expect that. Holy moly!
Cass's thought held a touch of awe. Not awe of his beauty, but of the power and something else this creature embodied. It creeped McKenna out. The Drakyn stood, seemingly unaffected by everyone looking at him, a mix of fear and wonder in their eyes. "Alfonso in his office?" she asked, wanting this done and over with. Maybe then they could get back to a normal life, if that even existed anymore. "Yeah, waiting for you." Lawson stayed outside, shutting the door even as he spoke. "Go ahead and take him in, he's waiting." The door shut. Coward. She sighed, recognizing that everything had been dropped on her. Fighting back the irritation, she darted a look over at her friends. JD and Cass stood together, Cass leaning into his furred form. Perce leaned against the wall, watching her, his black whiskers laid back tight against his muzzle. "Come on, then." She waved at the Drakyn and led the way to Alfonso's office, the huge being following her with his wings folded down against his back. She really wanted to inspect those wings. They were fascinating. But he made the already small hallway seem tiny. Glancing back, she noticed he blocked most of the light as she knocked on the open door. I really hope he's on our side. Mark Alfonso looked up and paled, blinking rapidly. "Holy fuck! It's a dragon!" "So everyone keeps saying. I am a Drakyn, and here to help in your, our fight against the Elentrin." His voice clearer than it should have been with that mouth formation. Maybe partially telepathic? Or maybe he's just practiced? Or maybe I know nothing about them? Alfonso cleared his throat. He started to wave them to a seat, but thought better of it with a second glance at the bulk of the Drakyn. "I know you've gotten in with the people at the top, Largo. Do you want to call them?" Weefor? What's the SecDef's number? She had no idea it had been a contact on her phone, and she had left that with Tony, just in case. With calm precision, Weefor rattled off the number, and she dialed it, setting the phone on speaker with everyone watching everyone else. All in all, she'd really like to have just crashed. The emotional whiplash of the day had drained her. In sleep, there was the chance of happier things. "Barbie, who is this? And how did you get this number?" His voice snapped out, harsh and tired on the third ring. "Doug, it's McKenna, Largo. I have a situation." It was the nicest way she could think of to put it. There was a pause, then a heavy sigh, and she swore she heard liquid pouring into a glass. "McKenna, not that I don't enjoy your company, but every time you call, my hair gets grayer." "You're bald," she pointed out, voice dry. Alfonso looked at her with his eyes wide and face pale. "You're talking to the Secretary of Defense," he hissed, his voice so low she almost couldn't hear him. But she did, and rolled her eyes at him. "I shave because otherwise I'd look like Santa or a monk, neither of which is appropriate. So, what is it now?" She didn't know how to interpret the odd tone in his voice, and frankly, didn't have the energy to try. Either that or I'm getting lazy knowing how the people in my head feel. That might not be a good thing. "We have someone here that has offered to help us." She started off slowly, not sure how to say this. "Someone? What type of someone? Why would the Russians or the Brits come to you? They have their own problems, and I doubt they care about ours." A curiosity and exasperation mixed together in his voice. She should have felt sorry for the bombshell she was about to drop. She didn't. "Our possible ally is a Drakyn." She almost added the "sir," but right now, she didn't feel all that respectful. He wasn't out here risking his life like they were, watching people they liked die. "A what?" The screech had her pulling back from the phone, glad it hadn't been up to her ear. "You heard me. A Drakyn has shown up and offered to help." There was silence, then a flurry of noises, keys clicking as he typed, and a muffled shout of, "Get in here now!" to someone on his end of the line. "We'll have someone headed your way to pick it up. Where are you?" She could tell he was trying to find something to write their address down on. Before either Mark or she could reply, the Drakyn spoke. For some reason, both she and Alfonso were startled. He took so much space, but he had stood so quietly his presence had disappeared from her awareness. That was distinctly uncomfortable. No, I will only deal with McKenna Largo and her family unit. They are the ones I will interact with. They watched me arrive as a part of her. It is only fitting they are my liaisons. That same musical quality of the voice echoed through the room and vibrated down to her bones. But this time, it felt like unmovable granite making a statement. Chapter 2. Meet the Family. In most urban areas of all states, the garbage companies are also collecting bodies. The dense metal of the trucks makes them the ideal collectors. All telecommunications companies have worked in concert to set up an 800 number that routes you to the nearest collector to call in for dead Elentrin on the street. More rural areas are asked to either take the bodies to the local crematorium or dispose of them individually. Note that this only applies to aliens. For any other body type, the police will be dispatched. TNN News. Captain Alfonso swallowed and looked like he would have rolled away if he had the room. Instead, he just sat up a bit straighter, and his hand dropped beneath the desk. "Don't you dare," McKenna snapped out, and he flushed a bit, pulling his hand out. "Dare what?" Burby asked, on the other end of the line. "And why would he only deal with you?" "Like I know. Ask him." She waved at the Drakyn, who crossed his arms across his chest and just gave her a level look. I hang around JD and Purse. Arms the size of my thighs should not intimidate me. "He's just staring at me and not answering, so I'd say it's not negotiable," she finally said, when the Drakyn just looked at her. "Fine, whatever. I'll get someone down there to get you guys. But be aware, it's getting worse out there. China? Yeah. Let's just say China may never be a power again." "We will meet at her family unit residence. It is proper all of them are involved." The voice rumbled again, and McKenna heard choked sounds from the hallway, as well as squeaks of excitement from kids who were eavesdropping in her head. That made her realize she had been channeling everything into the mind space, something that had become automatic, and it meant this dragon could feel them. "No, I have children. I won't put them at risk by your presence." The words slipped out, and she didn't even try to moderate them, just glaring at this being who could probably break her in half if he wanted. Hell, he could probably break Purse in half. He pulled back, scales around his nose and eyes flaring slightly as his eyes widened, and for a second the swirl of colors sucked her in. "I would never put nestlings at risk." He deflated back down to his normal. "But I understand your fears. However, it is important that I meet all of your unit, even the nestlings. It is proper." "Why?" Tony's voice had a sharpness to it that hurt, but McKenna didn't even attempt to gainsay what she asked. She needed to know the answer also. In fact, she could feel everyone's awareness pulling at the space as they all paid very close attention. Even Nam. The being blinked at them. She realized he had 2 sets of eyelids, like most reptiles, but he was close enough she could feel his body heat. So, not cold-blooded? So many questions, and not enough answers. "You are the ones I will be working with. You will be the leaders for your people. You have the information you will need to make this already loaded into your memories. It is only proper you are involved in the saving of your people. You are the leaders." McKenna frowned at him. "No, we aren't. The president is the leader. I'm just a police officer that got an AI stuck in my head. I don't have the power to do anything." His brows furrowed. "You are the leaders. You will be. It will be you who decides what comes after. You have the knowledge and ability to make the correct choices. If I work with anyone else, they will lack the knowledge needed.
His hand, with 3 fingers and the thumb, and scaled with sharp claws where nails would be, reached up and rubbed his left eye ridge, then jerked his head up, his ridges rising up. On a human, she would have interpreted it as an, "oh yeah," reaction.
Ah, I had forgotten. I was instructed to say certain words where all could hear them. Without speaking them, the knowledge would not be accessible.
He cleared his throat and said slowly, both out loud and pushing through the mind space.
Stars of Alara, find justice for the ashes of Alara.
McKenna wondered if their new ally was insane. But a cry of pain or surprise came from outside the small office and inside the mind space.
What the hell?
The words exploded from her, in mind and out loud, as she took 2 steps and looked down the hall. Perce, JD, and Cass all leaned against the wall, grabbing their heads, panting.
Oh, shit. That hurt. Kids?
McKenna could hear a frantic tone to Tony's thoughts and the impression of movement. "Charlie, are you okay?" she asked as she headed down the hall towards the others, who were shaking their heads slowly and standing up straight again. Though the slowness in their movements reminded her of the poison that had wreathed through them not so long ago.
That hurt.
There was a hint of a whine in his voice, and Charlie almost never whined.
What hurt? What happened?
She tried not to panic at his tone, but Tony and the kids were so far away from her. Trying to tamp down the feeling of everything spiraling out of her control, not that she had ever been in control, she headed over to Perce. JD was already checking Cass out, his large clawed hands gentle on her fragile skin.
You okay?
Her voice came out raspy as she got close to Perce, and she didn't like it.
This is my fault. I had been warned there might be pain involved. I forgot.
McKenna whipped her head towards the dragon, glaring at him.
What did you do to them?
Accusation and frustration coated her tone, but the being only shrugged.
It's okay, Kenna,
Perce rasped out, dropping his hand from where it had been grasping his head.
Remember the dreams we've had? Well, apparently we had a bunch more that were blocked from us. All that info got dumped into our brains at once. It was a bit intense, to say the least.
Intense? I swear for a second I expected Minerva to burst out of my head,
Cass muttered. But she didn't sound amused.
My brain now feels gorged and overstuffed, as if I'd eaten too much information.
Yes, that,
Tony chimed in.
My brain has a tummy ache,
Jessie contributed, and McKenna had to close her eyes and fight the desire to be home, hugging her kids and protecting everyone. Though I'm curious why this didn't hit me too.
It was necessary.
The rumble of words was musical, but they set McKenna's teeth on edge. She spun, ready to attack this invader. Her stomach churned, body wound tight enough to break.
Kenna, no!
JD's voice reached her at the same time Perce pulled her back against him. In warrior form, he still had a decent amount of height on her. She fought for a second, then calmed down. Closing her eyes, she concentrated on breathing in and out, all too aware of the audience. I always have an audience these days. She let her eyes slip back open and looked at her friends. Explain, please? She moved it to mind speak, not wanting to let everyone know what happened until she could get a handle on how dangerous.
Ash has been giving us training. Information to help defeat the Elentrin. It was locked until just now. Maybe to protect us, maybe him, but it's information we needed. It'll just take a bit to get it all unpacked and figure out what we know.
JD's voice was calm and steady, as always. Her rock.
Truly, I did know it would hurt. I did not realize the level of pain that would be involved. If I had known, I would have spoken the trigger words in a much less public space.
The Drakyn glanced around at all the soldiers surrounding them, many with weapons ready to jerk up at the slightest wrong move. JD shook his head, straightening up to his full height.
Chill out, people. Just a headache. Not like I got shot or tased or something.
A round of snickers ran through the room at that. The stories of McKenna's misadventures had provided humor when it was sorely needed. For her part, McKenna rolled her eyes, her tension fading, and turned back to the small office. Captain Alfonso stood there, face a bit pale and eyes wide. "You didn't expect this job to be boring, did you?" she said, trying to lighten the mood. Mark tried to smile and gestured to the phone. "Secretary of Defense is still on speaker." He almost squeaked it out, and she sighed, walking back in. "How much did you hear?"
Enough to know I'm headed back to your place. Anyone else I should bring?
You get a new Joint Chief yet? If this helps the way we hope, we'll need someone who can order military types around besides you. Someone that might have an idea of tactics. Otherwise, since I don't know how he can help, I can't answer what's going to be the right people to bring. On the other end, Doug sighed.
You're never what I expect. Meet you there this afternoon. I hope this works. We're taking heavy losses in dense urban areas. At this point, I can guarantee you every person currently in office won't be reelected.
McKenna snorted. Am I supposed to care? This has nothing to do with politics. It's about survival. If I honestly thought that anyone in office could have stopped this and didn't, I'd skin them alive. Slowly. But as it is, we'll suffer through. A burst of laughter from the other end, and Alfonso flinched.
I'd join you. You're right, though. Most voters won't care. Oh, well, if we make it through this, I'm done. I will have served to the best of my ability. After this, I'm retiring and going to work on forgetting aliens exist.
The words were meant to be humorous, she thought. But she flinched, knowing they were the aliens now. Okay, bring food. We'll be more comfortable in human form and we'll need the calories. You can get the good stuff better than we can at this point.
Understood. See you in a few hours.
The line clicked, even as she heard him start to give orders on the other end. Rubbing behind her ears, it really did feel good and relieved stress. She looked at Mark. Can you get us a vehicle and escort? We're about 35 miles from here. More of a suburban area. I suspect the level of Kaylid is lower there because of all the shuttles I've watched. Not many have gone there, and my people there have kept a very low profile. I'll probably need some snipers, people that know how to fight. If they attack us there, they'll do it en masse, assuming they have any idea what's up. They might not.
If they know I am here, they will bombard your planet and focus on this area. It would be best if they had no idea.
The Drakyn's voice rumbled behind her, and she flinched. It was his voice. We Fours created an odd dissonance in her mind. His hit every primal reaction she had, much like when that lion roared. She wanted to run, hide, kneel, worship, all wrapped up in one emotion. It created an odd reaction she didn't like, and it made her cranky. Well, we aren't going to broadcast it. They don't seem to communicate much, so we'll get you to our place, but if anyone sees you, he'll cause a stir. You aren't exactly inconspicuous, but we'll try.
I assume you all look like this being here?
He indicated Cass and Alfonso with a wave of his hand. Well, yes. Variations of colors and stuff. Granted, Cass is a female by gender, while Alfonso is a male, if that makes a difference, she replied, her arms folded across her chest as she glared at him. The corner of his mouth turned up, the scales pulling slightly, but he didn't reveal any teeth, which made her oddly comforted. Stupid primal brain. He's here to help. It didn't help. She still saw an apex predator and had to fight to not run away.
I had assumed. Well, my people do not nurse, so we have no mammary glands. It is not an unknown aspect of female genders. Though you do not have neutral genders, correct?
McKenna blinked and didn't know how to answer. What was a neutral gender?
No. While there are a few species on our planet with either both sexes or neither sex, humans are either XX or XY chromosome based, if that answers your question.
Cass responded, her sharp blue eyes fascinated. McKenna could see her fingers twitching, as if taking notes by typing on an invisible keyboard.
Yes, thank you. Interesting. My people are able to choose more what they want, if they want a gender, as we have triad chromosomes. But for now, that will suffice.
Suffice for what? McKenna stared at him. All of this just seemed so odd. Aliens, invasions, and now dragons? Even a movie would have had more logic than her life at the moment.
To make myself less obvious,
he rumbled and closed dark red lids over those swirling eyes. And how? She broke off in shock and took a step back, pressing into purse as the Drakyn started to change. Chapter 3. Going Home.
Who will win, the animal or the human?
More and more people are asking these questions after a few more attacks by rabid shifters. If you shift, will you de-evolve into your animal form? What does this mean for the protections that were rushed into law? People are starting to wonder if this new ability might come with more downsides than just invading aliens. TNN News. In front of her stunned eyes, the scales faded, drawing into the skin even as they smoothed out. A weird feeling struck McKenna again, as if she had a visitor in her head. But it felt familiar, so she didn't worry about it. What was happening was more incredible. McKenna couldn't take her eyes off his wings as in slow motion, yet still faster than she could countenance, shrank backwards and were pulled into the body, until she could hardly even tell where they had been. He condensed, shrinking down to be about the height of Perse, while his shoulders and body slimmed down to something approaching human norms. The colors of his reds and yellows smoothed out to be more normal, though his skin tone tended towards a red clay color that she'd never really seen on people. When he opened his eyes, they were the only part still fully inhuman. They swirled with colors almost opalescent and pale compared to the vivid colors they had been. His fully humanoid hands tightened his robes with quick, efficient movements to handle his sudden loss of mass. What? How? The words burst out of multiple mouths as they looked at a man who seemed human in most respects, about 6 feet tall and weighing maybe 250 pounds, with reddish-yellow hair and smooth skin. With sunglasses on, no one would have given him a second look if they passed him on the street. McKenna struggled with the realization he had weighed close to 500 when he got in the Humvee. The damn thing had tilted. It only shook a little when JD or Perse got it, and it sank when this being climbed in. The stranger tilted his head, looking at them, blinking. Even his secondary eyelids had disappeared.
You did need me to pass as a member of your species, correct?
Well, yes. What I don't understand is where the mass went. How do you weigh less now? I mean, I'm assuming you weigh less because you're physically smaller. If not, your mass would be insane. Most vehicles won't be able to support you.
Cass's voice bubbled out, and McKenna was glad she had said it. Her mind still couldn't get around the absorbing wings. A long beat of silence. Then he shrugged.
I do not believe I could explain it right here. Besides, if you can utilize that method, it might come in useful. But will this appearance work?
Was he avoiding? Hiding something from them? The questions ate at her. But lately, nothing ever seemed to get answered to her satisfaction. So she just let it go. You okay with bringing him home? McKenna asked, even knowing he would hear. This wasn't something she'd decide. They all had too much on the line, even though she didn't see any other choices but to go with his whims. Right now, she felt like she was being backed into a corner, and she wanted to hiss at the sensation.
I want to see the dragon.
Nam's voice was so soft, almost timid, but she had strength there, too, that McKenna had to smile at. You do? She knew her tone had softened. The little girl was too damn cute.
I do too. I never met a dragon before,
Jessie interjected before any of the adults could respond.
That would be because they don't exist. You can't have dragons. The math doesn't work.
Jamie's dismissive voice would get Jessie's temper up in 30 seconds. Luckily, Tony stepped in before it could escalate. If you two want to squabble, fine, but do it in your own mind space, not this one. Shoo. Yes, that's fine, Kenna. I'll get coffee and stuff going. I assume bigwigs are coming with you? I think Doug Burby and others will be showing up there, yes. I told him to bring food, if it helps. She offered, even as some of the tension had faded with the completely normal squabbling of the kids. Yeah, since we stocked up, we're still good on meats, but fresh stuff is pretty low, and trucks are hit and miss. Going to be some very hungry people by the time this is done. I know. We'll need to shift, but we can eat the calorie bars and do it slowly to use the least amount of calories. See you when we get there. She turned and looked at everyone. The pure humans looked confused at the silent staring, though the soldiers they worked with had gotten used to it. Take it you need an escort to your place? Alfonso said wryly. He seemed to have regained his equilibrium, and she appreciated that. Having him freaked out would create a ripple effect. Yes, please. Lawson, if you can spare him, but something a bit less obvious than the Humvee if possible, she responded, trying not to smile at the burble of excitement leaking down from the kids. He sighed and walked back into the office, and came out almost immediately, tossing a set of keys to her. There's a Suburban out there. Take it. If you see any place with gas, fill it up or you won't be driving it back. McKenna caught the keys in midair. Will do. Their cars had been damaged too badly during the firefight that first day to be drivable. Everything useful had been stripped out of them ages ago. She gave the dragon an arch look. Then let's get this show on the road. He furrowed brows at that, but followed them out of the back door. Lawson stood out there watching the area, a pensive look on his face. Hey, Lawson, you just got voluntold, JD said, a grin splitting his muzzled face, revealing too many sharp teeth. Lawson groaned. Great. What is it this time? Storm the White House? Rescue the princess? Who's this and where'd the Drakyn go? McKenna jerked her thumb at the Drakyn. Turns out they can change forms too. He's coming with us. Ready for an off-the-reservation trip? Even as she talked, she tossed him the keys, heading towards the dark gray Suburban sitting in the corner of the lot. With you guys? Why not? Not like I thought I'd live to see my pension. He followed her and climbed into the driver's seat. He took a minute to organize his weapons to be easily accessible, but not in the way. JD headed to the passenger side, while Percy and Cass climbed into the far back. Our place. We're taking this guy to meet the family, plus the Secretary of Defense and whomever else he drags along with him. Lawson choked. Shit, Largo. You don't do anything by half measures. He narrowed his eyes and at her, and the now human alien who looked around with interest. Don't you have kids at home? Yep. And he wants to meet them. She shrugged and said the thing that had been running through everyone's mind. Not like they'll be in any more danger than they're already in. There's aliens that want them, remember? Her voice dry and sarcastic. True. Well then, saddle up, boys and girls and other creatures. Time to go meet the family, Lawson said in a fake announcer voice. Don't quit your day job, JD advised. You'd starve to death trying to support yourself as a comedian. McKenna caught Lawson's mock glare as he closed the door, and she climbed into the back where the others waited. Cass and Percy were in the back row with the Drakyn turned human waiting for her on the bench seat. I can't believe this is my life. She shook her head and buckled in. She felt him watching her carefully as she adjusted the seatbelt. With elegant movements, he mimicked her. McKenna started to talk, but stopped before the words left her mouth. She'd gotten used to saying all the snarky, inappropriate stuff in her head, and now the person she wanted most to talk about could hear everything she said. When did I become that person? Or is it I'm just used to having all of them as my sounding board and vice versa? Knowing it's a place we can say anything? Make a note that if he's trustworthy, maybe we can have him teach us how to lock it down to private so no one else from outside can overhear. Huh. Wonder how the kids do it. The odd silence, both in and out of her mind, ate at her, while JD talked quietly to Lawson, giving him directions. It didn't help that Lawson drove the Suburban the same way he did the Humvee, like it was a sports car. The seatbelts were mandatory, even with almost no traffic. Lacking the desire to try and make small talk, she turned her attention to the scenery. Most of her questions needed to be heard by everyone. It felt odd to look outside and not have a weapon in her hand. They were heading quickly out of the city and into the dense suburbs of D.C. This is where they had run across the most action, and her hand itched to hold a weapon. Everyone in the vehicle fell silent, and she wondered if they were feeling the same disquiet. The Elentrin slaves liked to kick in doors and go through houses. They'd found enough tech to prove they could track Kaylid, but they couldn't get it to work for them. Probably the nanobots had a special wavelength or radiation or something. We four had suggested it, but McKenna's body didn't have any senses that would let her know. But since the commander module could ID Kaylid and have the symbol bounce up in her vision, it only made sense the Elentrin had the same ability. So many people dead. So many people captured. She'd made a habit of learning not to think, and some days she greatly missed the burn and softening whiskey once brought her. Not that she'd had any whiskey lately. Tony? Yes? A tilted amusement in the tone made McKenna wonder what was going on. Either way, she'd find out shortly. And she'd get to hug Charlie and Nom. That alone made going back to the house worth it. You have any alcohol? We've all earned more than a bit of distance. Oh, yes, please.
Yes, anything?
The comments from the rest all tripped over each other, and she didn't even bother trying to unravel who had said what. Yes, I'll have stuff waiting. McKenna didn't ask, just smiled, knowing whiskey would be in her future. Tell the bots to cut it back. We don't want to get drunk, but we all desperately need to take the edge off. The image of Caroline sagging to the ground filled her mind. Understood. New commands will be incorporated by the time you arrive at the house. McKenna felt the relief, even as the stranger in the vehicle tilted his head looking at her. The voice of your AI is most discomforting. His words fell like bricks in the car, as all the Kaylid looked at her, and she saw Lawson's frown in the rearview mirror. Yeah, but you get used to it. It's part of her. Part of us now. McKenna lifted her head in challenge. But rather than meeting the challenge, he nodded his head to her. I understand. Insult was not intended. She expected something else. But instead, he turned his head, looking out the window with every indication of being fascinated by what he saw. Half a dozen times she started to say something, then stopped. A scritching sound caught her attention, and she glanced back into the back where Cass had apparently found a notebook and a broken pencil. From the odd end and the bits of wood and graphite on the floor, McKenna figured she sharpened it with a claw. Desperate or something? Her tone teasing.
Yes,
Cass said, glancing up at her, flashing a smile.
So many questions and thoughts. I don't want to risk forgetting any.
The sheer Cassness of the comment made McKenna laugh, and for the last few minutes of the ride, everything seemed normal. Even the being sitting next to her in the car. The car slowed and pulled into a familiar driveway. Before it had even stopped, McKenna was out of the car and moving up the driveway. The door burst open, and a streak of blonde hair, pale skin, and boundless energy slammed into her. Joy swelled within her as she held him tight. Missed you, kiddo. Charlie just nodded, burying his head in her fur. Annoyance swept through her that she couldn't feel him against her skin, and she called her human form forth. Her fur melted away, and she felt her bones shift back into her normal form, just as a dark-haired missile hit her on the other side. A smile splitting her face, she kept Charlie close to her, but grabbed Nam and picked her up.
Damn, I missed you too.
Nam wrapped her arms around McKenna's neck and hugged her back just as tightly. The wave of love and joy washed through her from the two kids, and something in her relaxed. She held Nam close, but finally lifted her head to look around. Tony stood at the door in her human shape, her body tense, but a smile on her face. On the other side of the threshold peeked two dark heads, but they stayed inside. Behind her, McKenna could hear the others getting out of the car, but her attention was snagged by the burn marks on the house and blood on the driveway. Her heart rate spiked as she whirled around looking. The house, the entire area, showed signs of recent battles. She recognized the signs well enough by now.
You were attacked? Why didn't you say anything?
Her voice too loud on the overly quiet street. Anymore, people didn't even play radios and TV loud enough to be heard. Closed caption had become very popular. Because you couldn't do anything, and it would have only stressed you out. I handled it. We're fine. Tony glanced around the area, eyes sharp. No, we shouldn't stay out here much longer. People are noticing. McKenna followed her gaze and saw curtains and mini-blinds twitch. She also saw holes in screens big enough to allow rifles to slip through. All the cars were placed in garages, and the place hummed with wariness. Her new reality. But food is getting tight. It has to change, or we will break down. The bleak thought forced her into action. Yes, everyone inside now. Purse, JD, bring the weapons. Lawson, get the car in the garage. It should fit. Barely, but it should fit. Kids, back in the house, now. Tony turned and moved into the house, even as McKenna turned to see Purse encouraging the Drakyn to get out of the car. He moved slowly, as if off balance from the ride. The kids had darted in as soon as McKenna spoke. Everyone moved as if the atmosphere had sunk in, and no one wanted to be standing in the open. They entered the living room with only kids and the sound of Karina and Tony talking in the kitchen. McKenna sank onto the couch, and the kids immediately swarmed her, intent on not letting her go. Missing them had hurt so much, and she wouldn't exchange that pain for anything in the world. The Drakyn stood in the middle of the room, inspecting the place with interest. McKenna watched him, but he just looked, not touching anything. McKenna raised her voice. Tony, you have my cell phone? Yeah. Karina, could you give it to her? Karina came out of the kitchen, the phone in her hand, gave it to McKenna, then headed back in. The smells coming out of the kitchen made her stomach rumble. They'd eaten, but nothing like real cooked food. Mostly it had been MREs, cold canned food, or instant soups. She shook her head and pulled her attention away from food and the Drakyn. Instead, she focused on the phone. It took a minute to power up, but once up, she texted Burby. How long till you get here? His response came back almost at once. Another 10, bringing 5 people to our security. Chris is one of those. Have food and questions. She laughed softly at that, but at least he warned her. Then she blanched. She'd never told Chris about Caroline. Oh, that would suck. Chapter 4. Shifted Perceptions.
With the lockdown of many cities, food is getting scarce in some areas. Truckers, both shifter and normal, are being offered bonuses to make food deliveries. Most farms are in rural areas and are relatively unaffected by the invasion. They are making sure food is still being delivered to most canneries and are prioritizing fresh food deliveries. At this point, All people with CDIs have been federally granted the right to carry weapons across state lines if they hold a concealed carry permit in any state. TNN Invasion News. Our other guests will be here in another 10. There will be 5 people, including Christopher. Cass and JD closed their eyes for a minute, but nodded. Perce looked at her, and there was warmth and understanding in his eyes. We probably need to get some more chairs in here and make the space wider. Perce and JD nodded, moving couches and grabbing chairs, while Cass went into the kitchen. McKenna looked at the kids. Okay, kiddos, time to head up to your room. We don't know what's going to happen yet.
But I want to see the dragon,
Nom said, her voice soft and eyes wide.
I don't see a dragon here.
Jessie had a mutinous look on her face, and even Charlie widened his eyes to look at her. Only Jamie didn't look interested. Right, he doesn't believe in dragons. McKenna had to fight back a smile as she thought about it for a minute, and shrugged. While the dragon shifting now or later didn't affect anything, maybe walking in and seeing a huge humanoid dragon would get more across faster. Burby and his people weren't bad, but shock had a value all its own. The dragon was watching her, though he had maintained a decent distance from the kids. Only smart as Perce and JD were usually nearby. Claws still very prominent. Wonder why Tony's been hiding in the kitchen. Still watching the dragon, watching her, she pinged Tony, trying hard to keep it tight and private. If it was private from the others, maybe it would be private from the stranger? Hey, you okay? Any reason you're hiding in the kitchen? She felt the pause in her mind and turned to gaze towards the kitchen, even as she tightened her hold on the kids. They tensed in reaction, and she felt their awareness sharpen. But she kept part of her attention on the Drakyn, the rest on Tony. I missed you guys, and I'm fighting the temptation to pull all of you into my arms and never let you go again. It hurt not having you here. Her thoughts had truth, and a bit of embarrassment. Good, because we felt the same way. I thought our not being here would keep you safer. Apparently I was wrong. McKenna, no one is safe right now. But I took care of them. Left the bodies in the street and sent text for a body pickup, which is the strangest thing ever to say. McKenna wanted to follow up on that, but could feel everyone looking at her. Why don't you and Karina come out and meet the dragon? There was an odd pause, and for a minute McKenna thought she sensed a whiff of fear run through the other woman, but it was gone before she could decide what it was. Sure. Want a cider? Yes, please. The desire for that was high. Turning back, she noted Perce and JD had set up a wide ring of chairs. Amazing how quiet it was when the people involved could just pick up the furniture and move it. I know you changed to make it easier on us to get here, but it will help if the people coming, the people who have power to make decisions, can see your more alien form, and, well, you do look like a dragon in that form. Dragons don't exist, Jamie muttered. It was quiet enough McKenna pretended not to hear it, though from the glare Jessie and Nom gave him, they weren't so nice. Ah, there is no reason why I cannot do that, he said. As he spoke, his voice reverberated in the room like music. McKenna couldn't figure out how he got his vocal cords to do that. As he spoke, Tony stepped into the living room, 2 beers and 3 ciders in her hands. McKenna smiled at her, took the cider, but quickly moved her attention back to the being. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Tony hand the drinks to the others, then move to watch the stranger. Something about her behavior kept pulling McKenna's attention away, but she couldn't focus on it right now. He took a deep breath and started to change. It's a bit different from ours. Smoother,
and as if he decides what happens. Her musings were interrupted by the Drakyn speaking again, even though his eyes were closed.
Do you wish wings on this form?
Yes!
A chorus of young voices rang out before McKenna could even start to respond. She glanced down to see all the kids had their gazes locked on him, rapt fascination on their faces. Even Jamie. A corner of his mouth tilted up.
Then wings it shall be. They remind me of my siblings' nestlings when they were still limited to one form.
The comment came across as an offhand remark, but the idea that he had brothers and sisters, that his people had families, made her relax just a little. As he changed, his hands went to the robe, loosening it as from the back of his body, wings slowly formed and flexed as they emerged. The red scales all but glowed in the muted light through the windows, and McKenna could hear the lack of breathing as everyone watched the man turn into a humanoid dragon.
I saw, but I didn't believe. It is you.
Tony's voice was barely a whisper. But McKenna and the dragon turned to look at her. Her eyes were wide, and her face had paled a bit as she stared at the Drakyn, her breathing rapid.
Tony, are you okay?
McKenna asked, starting to rise, even with the kids all but engulfing her. The dragon fastened his eyes on her, those weird, swirling colors, and Tony sucked in a sharp breath. He seemed to do the same, frozen in a statue of power and grace, looking at her.
No, yes, sorry, just...
The words came out in a stumbling halt. Cass and JD both moved towards her, but before they could reach her, the sound of a vehicle pulling into the drive grabbed their attention.
You deal with that, I'll be in the kitchen,
Tony blurted, and McKenna watched in astonishment as Tony fled. Tony Diaz, who never backed down from anything, fled. The dragon turned to watch her go. She wanted to follow her, but already she could hear people getting out of their cars, and letting them stay outside wouldn't be acceptable. Standing, with Nom still in her arms, the little girl was channeling a spider monkey, refusing to let go. JD and Perce were glaring at the Drakyn, even as Cass followed Tony into the kitchen. But McKenna couldn't even talk to her mind to mind. She didn't want to take her attention away from what was about to happen. She walked to the door and glanced through the window to see the stressed faces approaching her. With a resigned sigh, she pulled open the door. 5 people stood there. Christopher and Doug she recognized. A new man in his late 50s in a uniform. Marines, maybe. Another agent. And a woman in tactical cargo pants, a tank top, with a loose cardigan over it. All of them had weapons on them, and looked like they knew how to use them. Is that a good sign? Or bad that everyone comes armed and you care more about their ability to use the weapon than anything else? Come on in. She stepped aside, letting them all come inside. They moved in quickly, but almost all of them slammed to a halt as they set eyes on the Drakyn.
Stars and stripes, she wasn't kidding,
the new military guy said, his hand twitching a bit. McKenna got the door shut and pushed past them. Kneeling, she set Nom down, even though the little girl didn't want to let go. Time to go, kids. Go play. We'll let you know if anything happens. This is going to be boring adult arguing. Dragons, Jamie muttered, and headed towards the dragon, his hand outstretched as if to touch the wings. Nom followed a half step behind him. I don't think so. She gently grabbed both of them and shooed them out of the room. Jessie pouted and looked like she would protest, but Charlie and Jamie grabbed her and dragged her away. Nom followed with a long last look at the Drakyn. McKenna turned around to see everyone still standing there, staring at their visitor, and her temper snapped. Gods, get in here! Take a seat! He's here to help, and standing and staring at him like he's a circus freak isn't helping anyone! Her voice had a sharp edge, and she saw JD cast her a sideways glance. McKenna ignored him. She wanted normalcy, and knew it would never happen again. Doug Burby cleared his throat and moved over to one of the kitchen chairs while the agent stayed near the door. Chris stood behind the chair the military guy took, watching everything. The woman, she looked like she had Hispanic in her background mixed with something that gave her gray eyes. She didn't fit, but McKenna couldn't find it in herself to care. "Welcome, everyone. May I introduce our guest?" She turned to the visitor and froze. With a sigh, she rubbed her temples. "And I don't know his name because I'm not getting enough sleep, enough food, and the damn AI won't let me get drunk even if we had the alcohol, so there it is!" With a frustrated jerk of her hands, she sank back into the couch and considered going after the kids. That sounded much better than dealing with all of this. The woman grinned at her, a flash of coffee-stained teeth, then fastened her eyes on the huge being. The variation of red, yellow, with just a hint of purple in his scales, shone in the light through the windows. His eyebrows moved in a gesture that made McKenna think it was a sign of amusement. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Tony watching from the kitchen, an odd look on her face. Cass hung back, giving her emotional support, while Karina looked at everything. But the dragon kept the majority of McKenna's attention. The Drakyn looked at her and nodded.
"It is expected. You have brought me into your nest, though I still need to be introduced to all your nest members. Disorientation is understandable."
He looked around at all of them and performed an odd half-bow, half-nod. Either way, it came across as elegant and refined.
"I am Rawer's Goldwing Learline. I am here as both a warrior and ambassador of the Drakyn. I come both to offer assistance and beg assistance in the battle against the Elentrin. They have declared themselves blood enemies against me and mine, and while we are not blame-free, we have never killed theirs wholesale. As one of the warriors, I beg for you to help us, and allow us to help you in this fight, before you too are destroyed by their hate."
McKenna looked at him, stunned. That's it? Nothing great or glorious? No, "We have magical powers and I'll destroy you if you don't help"? No, "This is what I can offer, how can you help me"? Dang. I think I'm expecting too much from aliens. She blinked at him, knowing she looked like an idiot. To her relief, Burby spoke up before she could make an even bigger fool of herself. "And how can you help us? Do you have weapons we can use against the Elentrin?" His eyes sharp as the Marine leaned forward, watching. Rawers, he pronounced it Rawers, shrugged.
"We do not have many weapons in our culture. The Elentrin are the only enemy we have. We have spent countless years trying to hide from them or make peace." "How's that worked for you?" the Marine asked, his voice dry. Rawers bowed a bit, his wings spreading. "As you can see, I am here, begging assistance."
Doug sighed and looked at McKenna's friends, all looking at him. "You never bring me easy stuff. I don't have time to play the political games."
"You have less time than you think,"
Rawers said, his voice oddly gentle, for a being that looked like he could take out a tank. "Why do you say that?" Again, the Marine asked the question. Really? I need to start asking names or demanding introductions.
"Per my source, they are starting to collect asteroids to send at your planet. The last time they did that, the planet was destroyed to the point that over 95% of all life was killed."
The room went quiet, and the woman said slowly, "You mean 95% of all people?" McKenna winced. She knew the answer to this.
"No. Even the species in the oceans and the insects were destroyed. The only remaining people are ones we rescued, or are slaves to the Elentrin. Most of creatures that lived in that planet only remain as memories to a select few."
Chapter 5. True Colors.
Elentrin have been spotted moving through Rome. Drones being used by various government agencies have been tracking any shuttle not doing straight drop. They often are disgorging an Elentrin who starts to walk around. Already, people are coming out to meet the aliens. The two original women haven't been seen for a while. What does this mean for the center of Christianity on Earth? TNN News.
The first day of the invasion, at least when aliens started dropping to the Earth, Raymond Kennedy hid in his apartment, terrified they might sense that he was a creature like them. Even the wonder of the warrior form couldn't get past the loathing of knowing he'd been infected like an animal. The news covered these aliens dropping into cities, shooting people, and carting them to shuttles that then took off with their captured prizes inside. The idea of being one of those so callously disposed of locked him in his own home. But as hours passed, then a day, he realized they didn't know about him specifically. Boredom, more than anything else, kicked him out of his panicked mindset and let him start looking around. The government had been all but shut down. No congressional meetings, no movers and shakers having lunches together, no passing by staffers in the hall, seeing what they might let slip. Raymond hadn't been so frustrated since his teens. Without his ability to gauge people's moods, reactions, to catch the feeling of what was going on in the halls of power, he felt hamstrung, useless. That was not acceptable. Careful inquiries proved the Black Ops group he'd used to drop off those meddling idiots in the jungle had been deployed to other areas to deal with the threats. Of the 6 people involved, 3 had been reported dead. Just as well, it reduces ties back to me. Not that I think it will matter once this is all over, but I'll need to remember to clean up any loose ends. Those shifters have become way too high profile to allow this to stand. Showered, and in jeans and a t-shirt, unusual garb for him, he contemplated going out. He was like most staffers and ate out more than anything else, which meant his food stores were low to begin with, and shifting into that wolfman form hadn't helped. He was down to rice and flour, and not being a chef, he had no idea what he could make from that other than rice. The news had listed stores with limited supplies that would be open for 6 hours today, and some of the small shops were open, though you had to knock for entrance. Arming himself with his 1911, what real men used, and a small bag, he slipped out. Stepping out onto the street, the first thing he noticed was how quiet it was. Normally, the area of D.C. he lived in had a constant stream of car engines, honking, people chattering, heels clicking on the sidewalks, dogs barking, just noise that created a background he never noticed. Now, he was hyper-aware of the lack of that noise. Walking down the street, he kept swiveling his head, trying to pay attention to everything. He held the drawn pistol in his right hand, and the bag gripped loosely in his left, ready to be dropped at a moment's notice. I need to invest in a backpack, plebeian as they are. It would be nice to have both hands free right now. The thought got added to his list of things that needed to change, though that item was much simpler than many of his others. As he walked, his anger grew at the aliens that had forced this great country to this. People hiding in their homes, scared to emerge. He saw blinds move, curtains twitch, but no kids outside, not even dogs. Everyone was hiding. That stupid bitch and the football player, this is their fault. Even after we win against these aliens, they will still be here, ruining our world. That isn't acceptable. He only saw one vehicle on the street. An older model truck with a gun rack in the back holding 2 rifles. The man driving it nodded at him as it went by, but nothing else was said. Raymond just fumed. I should be sitting in an elegant restaurant, getting information to use against someone and figuring out how to make this country what it should be. Strong, unified, and led by those with the talent and skill to rule. The frustration and irritation that arose from that thought caused his spine to stiffen and his pace to pick up. New goal. Sure, the shifters have no place on this planet and are not a threat to any true human. The knowledge that he was what he hated got pushed further and further back in his mind. This was just proof that he was better than the rest of them, because he didn't need to change, didn't need to flaunt the unnaturalness to the world. He could control himself and help others control those who weren't as smart and skilled as he was. He strode to the grocery store 6 blocks from his brownstone, scanning as he went. As soon as America got back on its feet, these aliens would see that regular humans weren't prey. The door slid open as he approached. Cautiously, he walked into the silent store. The lack of music threw him off for a bit. It had never dawned on him before how much noise they were surrounded with all the time. A cashier rose up, rifle in hand, and looked at him.
Prices are as marked. You can spend up to $100, cash only, no produce left. There's the guard at the meat section. Tell him what you want, and he'll get it for you.
Normally, cashiers were young, awkward teens or middle-aged women that looked like they had forgotten how makeup worked and didn't care. This one was in his mid-30s, fit, and held the rifle like he had no issue using it. Raymond just nodded. He'd grabbed cash, expecting that, but he sneered internally anyway. If he's so fit, why isn't he out there fighting against these invaders? Keeping the sniff to himself, he moved farther into the store, then stopped. How barren the shelves were surprised him. Where normally every shelf was full, now the pickings were slim. There was food, but nowhere near as much as what he had expected. Offended on a level he couldn't explain, he started to raise his voice to demand to know where the groceries were, but the quiet movements of the other shoppers stopped him. Yet another thing these aliens need to pay for. Outrage coated his entire being as he stalked past the bare shelves. True to the cashier's word, an armed guard stood at the empty meat freezer.
Is there any meat?
Even his words sounded overly loud, and he flinched, lowering his volume a little.
I'd like to get some, maybe 2 packages. What is there? Hamburger at $5 a pound, chicken at $3 a pound, steaks at $6 a pound.
The guard spoke just as softly.
Everything is 1 pound packages only.
Raymond clenched his teeth, but had to admit they could have tripled the price and hadn't. Instead, just limiting what you could buy.
2 packages of hamburger, 1 of chicken.
He spoke the words through clenched jaws, but the guard just nodded.
Spaghetti, hamburger helper, and some chicken Alfredo. That should do me for at least a week if I can get some eggs.
The guard came back with the meat and put it in the cart. Raymond found the rest of what he needed, but to his surprise, there were lots of eggs at $3 a carton. He grabbed some, processed ham, and then headed to the cashier. Everything together totaled $50. They were using only round numbers, and he didn't care that the taxes had been rounded up too. Change made too much noise. But curiosity made him ask about the eggs.
Why so many eggs for relatively cheap? Locals have brought them into trade, and eggs last a long time without refrigeration, so we've gotten lucky. They go far when mixed with other food,
the cashier stated, his eyes wary as Raymond finished packing everything in his bag, the eggs on top.
Good to know.
Trying to maintain the facade of caring, he nodded and headed out, his gun at the ready. He paid closer attention to his surroundings as he walked back towards his home, not wanting to risk being mugged for the groceries. His stomach grumbled at the thought of food soon, though the eggs were interesting, and the idea of barter sparked ideas deep in his mind of down-the-road possibilities. As he walked, he realized the area was rather nice with the quiet. He'd never realized how loud all the horns and engines were. Raymond almost smiled as he headed back to his house. He'd just crossed a street and was approaching the end of the businesses where the more residential area started up, when he heard a faint sound. It seemed crystal clear in the quiet of the day. The screaming got louder, and he looked around for something to get behind. No sense asking for trouble. An alley up ahead with 2 over-full dumpsters lay to his right. Stepping up the pace, he moved into the alley and behind the trash. He set his bag down on the ground, carefully, not wanting to break those eggs. He squatted and looked through the gap between the dumpster and the wall. It placed him far enough back that he had a full view of the entrance of the alley. A woman carried a young kid, probably between 4 and 7. He avoided kids if at all possible. Babies were only good to get votes.
Help! Someone help! They're after me! Help!
Idiot. Yelling just tells them where you are. His thought scornful as he watched her run past, the sound of her hard shoes echoing on the pavement. And really, if you think you will have to run, wear sneakers. A moment later, a Kaylid came into view, stopping and raising its weapon. A red bolt snapped out of it, and he heard a dull thud and the crying of a kid. The Kaylid paused, looking down the alley, right towards him. It lifted its head, then wrinkled its nose as it stood there. Raymond froze, not even breathing. After what seemed like an eternity, and his lungs had started to burn, it turned and headed down the street. He still sat, not breathing, listening as hard as he could. A whine, and the cry cut off. His vision pulsed at the corner of his eyes, but he didn't dare breathe. The same furred beast, its pelt the colors of rotten tomatoes, stalked back by, the woman draped over his shoulder. This time it stalked by, not even stopping. And still, Raymond didn't move. Good riddance. The more that are gone, the easier it will be to put them in their proper place, serving their betters. That thought gave him the strength to keep holding his breath, no matter how his lungs burned. 10 more seconds. I can make it 10 more. 5, 8, 10. He took in a slow breath, fighting to not gasp as his lungs pulled in the air that he needed so bad. His mouth tasted metallic from the saliva that had pooled in it. Breathing in slowly, quietly focused him. A half hour passed before he rose on legs that had fallen asleep, but not even the pins and needles sensation caused him to make a sound. Picking up the bag quietly, he flipped off the safety on the gun. With the gun raised, he crept to the alley entrance, then stopped just out of sight, listening. Nothing. You need to get home. He stuck his head out and peered in the directions the Kaylid had gone. All the joy of the peaceful day, gone. He couldn't see or hear anything, so he turned and headed at a fast walk to his house. The child lay crumpled in the middle of the street, blonde hair a direct contrast to the dark of the pavement. This is why we need a genetic cleansing. People like that are too stupid to live, and the idea of them spreading their genes to those humans that are worthy to rule them, unthinkable. He moved on past the girl, making sure he made as little noise as possible. He lived 3 blocks past that and turned onto his street with relief. Raymond didn't let himself run, but he headed up the stairs into his brownstone, shutting and locking the door with relief. Animals. They're all animals. We need to make sure they're protected from them. The very fact that these aliens think their livestock is proof enough that we should make sure their existence can't hurt us anymore. Raymond put away his groceries and did some cooking even as he thought. We need to put laws in place to prevent them from ever being in positions of power. This just proves shifters are nothing more than animals. Not only do they change into animals, they're hunted like prey, culled like livestock. They passed the amendment to the Constitution giving them protection, but I can make it so they're shunned. Regardless of the legal protection, you can't force people to hire someone. He hummed as he cooked, thinking about ways to sway people. Riders to put in bills that would make it better to hire humans than these animals. The court of public opinion. People believe anything if someone they trust says it. Then they repeat it and spread it. A slow smile crept across his face as he sat down to eat. And I know exactly how to start this campaign. He'll help me. I'm sure. Chapter 6. Talking it out. The new rage is home gardening.
For the restricted hours that the local home improvement stores are open, they are reporting that all seeds and vegetable plants are sold out in the first open hour. With it being late summer, the growing season is limited. But with proper care, many plants can grow and produce food. Also, the countertop plant gardens have been going for upwards of $100 each. But with food getting tight, any bit can help. Across the country, waivers for having chickens in backyards has also been granted, and hens are going for $40 to $60 a piece. This feels like a throwback to World War II, but any food source is valid. Hunting licenses are being granted liberally, and even in states where hunting has historically been low, they are having record turnouts of hunters. TNN Invasion News. A ding from the kitchen pulled everyone's attention away, and McKenna sighed. Did you bring food? We're all pretty hungry, and this might take a while. Oh yeah, Laurent, would you go grab the food, please? The SecDef said, with a weary sigh. The other agent nodded and headed out the door, gun up and scanning before he stepped out. Doug looked at all of them, and then closed his eyes and rubbed his temples a bit. He groaned an exhausted sound. Yes, food and drink sounds good. He opened his eyes and looked at Rowers. This is not the way it should go. You should have a team of diplomats, advisors, and everything else. But right now, that really isn't an option. I can get a few people on the phone and we can talk. The only reason I'm even still in the area when everyone else is bunkered down is I have no family. I'm former military, and enough of the cabinet trusts me to let me be the forerunner for all this. We're in trouble. The rural areas are holding up well enough, but inner cities are a mess. If people figure out we're about to be pounded by asteroids, society will collapse. He looked like he was about to say something else, then shook his head. You might want to introduce us before everyone is really confused. Because so far, the only person whose name I know is our visitor. The woman spoke with a hint of amusement in her voice. Doug looked at her and nodded his head. Probably. It might make me look like less of an idiot. He rose to his feet and gave a half-nod, half-bow to Rowers. I apologize for the disorganized way you have been greeted. Our only excuse is an alien invasion is not the norm for us. He paused as Laurent came back in, pulling a wheeled cooler. Then continued. My name is Doug Burby. I'm the Secretary of Defense for this nation. Please be aware there are many nations on our planet, and I can only speak for ours. Rowers tilted his head at that, but nodded. Doug turned to the Marine who had stood while he spoke. The man wore his dress uniform. That was the only reason McKenna figured he was a Marine. The blues looked like he'd been wearing them for days, and a gun was holstered at his hip. This is Gunny Sergeant Philip Roberts. He is the acting Joint Chief. McKenna saw J.D. tilt his head, his brows rising up. Doug must have seen it as he half-smiled, if that was what the twist of his lips qualified as. Yes, it's unusual. Okay, it's never fucking been done, but to have an NCO as the Joint Chief, but he's qualified for a few reasons. He's here, he has combat experience, and he has a brother who's a colonel in the Army and a sister who's a captain and a pilot in the Air Force, giving him a better grasp of what is available than most. That. And he's damn good and isn't a bigoted asshole like the last guy. Doug shrugged. Besides, we can't get anyone else in. They're all trapped in their local areas, and at this point, I just need someone with ideas of how to use the various groups to help, so, yeah, he's acting JC. McKenna turned a laugh into a cough, and the gunny shot her a smile that let her know he'd heard the story. Everyone, Gunny Roberts said in a soft voice, though he didn't take his eyes off of Rowers. I wonder how much of that is due to him being Drakyn and how much is due to him being a threat. Burby turned to the woman who still sat and just waved at everyone, a bright smile on her face. This is Blair Lewis. She's a cultural anthropologist and has been advising on how our interactions with the Elentrin went. You mean sideways? J.D. interjected. She couldn't read his face in warrior form, but in the mindscape, she got the feeling he hadn't really meant to say it out loud. Oh, I doubt I'd use that term.
I'd go with screwed from the start. We never had a chance. However, if we can figure out how they view the world, maybe we can use it against them. Or we kill them all. I'm fine with either. Her smile showed all teeth, and McKenna blinked. More bloodthirsty than most scientists I've run across, McKenna commented, all too aware of Rowers listening and paying attention to all of them, though Tony's continued lurking in the kitchen nagged at the back of her mind. My sister was killed in London in one of the first landings, protecting some teens that were shifters. I never was much for pacifistic crap anyhow, Blair said, and focused on Rowers. Laurent came out of the kitchen, the cooler obviously staying in there. They said they'd have food out shortly. He kept furniture between him and Rowers, though all of them gave Rowers a wide berth. Do you have anything you can't eat or don't eat? No. Food is fine. I doubt there is any food on your planet I am not capable of ingesting without incident, Rowers replied in a level voice, as if none of this disturbed him. In other circumstances, McKenna might have dug out hot peppers to test that. But now she removed it as anything to worry about, and the smells from the kitchen were very distracting. Sir, if I may? Gunny Roberts asked. Doug waved at him. Go for it. But, Rowers? He waited until the Drakyn had focused on him. We're desperate. I don't have time for fancy negotiations or anything. I'll promise what I can, but I might be overruled. Know that we are very fragmented now, and what I say may not be backed up by our politicians. Rowers' wings bobbled up and down a bit. Understood. I am familiar with the ways of politicians from other cultures. My culture doesn't support that type of interaction, but I do understand your structure. Others have had it, though, and many of them have also suffered from the Elentrin. He leaned back again, and McKenna arched her eyebrows as his tail created a way for him to balance in an odd tripod way. I wonder if that's comfortable. It does put him at a height advantage, but I don't have any stools, and anything else would either break under him or would be horribly uncomfortable. She let it be as the woman watched, while Doug waved at Roberts. All yours, Gunny. I have a few questions, if you don't mind, sir. This time it was clear he was addressing the Drakyn, who nodded and paid attention to the Marine. McKenna felt like a third wheel, and took another swallow of her cider, trying to ignore the food smells. It had been a while since they'd had home-cooked food. That is why I am here. Ask. I will not be offended. Rowers rumbled, his voice sounding more powerful than it should. I almost want him to go back to human, just so he feels more normal. But the point was to have him not be normal. Why me? McKenna sipped the cider again and tried to focus. Exhaustion, restricted calories, death, fear, and stress, they all combined to make her want to turn into her cat, curl up in a ball, and sleep. Could I get some caffeine? Falling asleep. Oh, yes, please. Cass and JD chimed in. McKenna glanced their way and saw Cass's head had started to droop, while JD never turned down caffeine. Rowers' head twitched their way, but he didn't turn and look at them. She knew he'd heard. Coffee or soda? Coffee, chimed all three, and Tony laughed. Will do. That conversation hadn't taken more than a few seconds, and Roberts had pulled out a leather portfolio and a pen, balancing it on his knees with the ease of long experience. As you can see, our planet is being assaulted at multiple points, but I can only address the military abilities of this country. It's a significant part of this continent, but not all of it. He waited until Rowers responded. That much had been expected, but we must work here because McKenna and her group are here. She got sharp looks from the government people, but she just shrugged at them. I will address that later. Right now, it isn't relevant, Roberts said.
So, we don't have any weapons that allow us to shoot the invaders down, coming in via high atmosphere drops. The shuttles are too fast and too small, and when they go back up, they usually have captured people in them. They already have too many of our people, and to be clear, by our people, I mean humans. At this point, I don't care if they're from China, Africa, or the US. They are ours, and we do not tolerate kidnapping or slavery. Good. That is mostly in accord with the information I had received.
Rowers moved his wings, but didn't let them spread out, though he looked around the living room.
Now that the nestlings are gone, is it permissible if I retract my wings? There is not enough space here for them without the risk of breaking things, and I tend to move them without conscious thought.
Burby blinked, as did the gunny. You can just remove your wings? Blair asked, scribbling left-handed in a notebook.
Remove? I can cause their mass to be stored elsewhere until needed. While I will miss them, I learned many seasons ago how to function in different forms, some without wings. But they do move with my reactions, and in this enclosed space, I might damage something.
Gunny and Burby shrugged. Rowers turned to McKenna.
Is it permissible to remove the wings while I work in this environment?
What? Rowers did that strange half-bow again.
This is your abode. It would be rude to be in a shape that you do not approve of.
Her mouth worked, but no sound came out, and Blair cleared her throat. If I may?
Please,
McKenna blurted, still trying to figure out how to say what needed to be said. Rowers, in our culture, very few people have the right to tell you what to wear or how to decorate your body. That is normally limited to parents, so you are free to remove or add wings as it feels comfortable to you.
What she said, McKenna commented, nodding her head and ignoring the mental snickers from the rest of her family.
Luckily, the Drakyn either didn't hear them or politely ignored them. Either was good with her.
Ah. Then I shall remove the wings. It will make this space feel less confined.
McKenna didn't know if he intended it or not, but the way he said the word made it clear he felt a bit claustrophobic in here. And again, his head was only a foot or so from the ceiling. She had a good 3 feet plus. Heck, so did Person JD. His eyes closed, and she caught Tony out of the corner of her eye, peering through the kitchen doorway, fascinated. Karina watched behind her, curious, but not captivated the way Tony seemed to be. It took a minute, but the wings were absorbed back into his body. It still felt different than how they shifted, but right now it wasn't what she needed to ask questions about. Maybe later, if there was a later, she could find out more about why We4 and the other nanobots were created, and why shifting worked the way it did. I've seen shifters change, but that's a new one on me. If things weren't so desperate to talk to you about other stuff, I'm sure I'd ask questions until you were ready to strangle me. Blair's voice embodied everything McKenna felt. She wanted to ask all her questions and address the confusion that surrounded this entire situation. But people were dying, and that mattered more right now. Philip Roberts shook his head and glanced down at his notepad.
Currently, we are fighting a war on multiple points, so we don't have any way to know where they'll be attacking at any given point or time.
We can't even figure out how they're narrowing in on shifters we have here in the U.S. Oh, I can answer that, McKenna volunteered. All eyes shifted over to her. The nanobots have a slight isotopic radiation that the proper equipment can pick up. It isn't anything I or other shifters can do, but the people that designed these nanobots would be able to scan for and narrow down to where they are. Plus, clusters of shifters radiate stronger on the equipment than solos. Though from what we've been able to see, the powerful scanners are in the shuttles, while the handheld ones seem to be more for narrowing down locations. Everyone stared at her. Even her friends.
What?
I told you I'd been talking to We4 about it. There wasn't anything we could do to block the scans, as we don't have the tech or the time to figure out a way. Telling all shifters to remain alone just puts more of them at risk, especially the kids. It's not like anyone in the government is talking to me on a regular basis. Oops. Did that sound a bit resentful? Okay, I guess being shuttled back here might have bugged me a little. Oh well. Burby ducked his head a bit, but didn't answer her. Everyone else just blinked. Finally, Gunny Roberts cleared his throat. Well, that does answer one question of how they're finding shifters. However, they still kill anyone between them and their target, and they are rapidly improving their techniques and their weapons. I hate to say this, but they are learning quickly and getting more deadly. McKenna sighed. She'd suspected that. It was getting harder to ambush them, and that didn't make it easier. Gunny looked up at Rowers, who still leaned on his tail and legs. It resembled calm patience that reminded McKenna of a hunting animal, content to wait until the time was right to attack. So that leads us back to the question. How can you help? Are there more of you coming? What else can you do besides shift? How can we fight them with the resources we have? Gunny Roberts asked the question in a calm and rational manner, but she could feel everyone tense as they focused even more directly on Rowers. He shrugged, and she could see how his wings would have moved with that movement. It felt like part of him was missing, but in his human form, it hadn't.
I am unsure. There is me. I might be able to get a few more warriors to assist. If we can make the Elentrin flee, I believe we can provide doctors and scientists afterward. But my people have very few that can fight or will fight. I am unsure of your resources, but as their ships are still in orbit above your planet, I assume you have no weapons to shoot them down. Doug snorted as Roberts answered. No, the majority of our weapons capable of making a dent on something the size of their ships have ballistic capabilities. Trying to shoot straight up or at things coming down won't work. The ships are too far away and our weapons are too slow. We don't have spaceships with weapons. While we could get a ship up there, we'd be lucky to get more than 3 or 4 people on it. And this goes for all countries, not just ours. Rowers blew a long, steady exhalation through his nostrils. His equivalent of a sigh, she supposed. I had figured as much. So what good are you going to be? Burby snapped this out, leaning forward and staring at the Drakyn. Enough, Blair said, softly laying her hand on his arm. Burby subsided, rubbing and rubbed his head. He looked like he'd aged a decade in the weeks since she'd first met him. They all did. You do have weapons, though? Rowers asked slowly, his head swiveling back and forth between the people there. Yes. Nuclear, biological, chemical, and then guns, which are a type of chemical weapon. We saw these on your media network. However, some of the content we were unsure if it was fiction or reality. It became confusing. For a while, we thought you had spaceships and energy weapons. But when we received word you were fighting back only with projectile weapons, we were disheartened. McKenna watched Blair scribble another note on her pad, as did Roberts, but it seemed to be thoughts for later, as they just listened. But you say you have nuclear weapons, and you obviously have warriors. He waved at McKenna and her friends, with Perce and JD still in warrior form. Lawson shrank back, not wanting to garner attention as he enjoyed the luxury of a beer. No, we're not warriors. Lawson is a soldier. Us, we're just trying to protect our people, our children, our planet. But this is not what we want to do or are even trained to do, McKenna protested. Lately it seemed all too easy to kill and lead. Easier than she wanted to admit, even to herself. Ah. Can all Earthlings fight like you? Or do you have more soldiers to assist? Gunny shrugged. Humans don't like to give up, and most of us put up a fight. But yes, I have soldiers. Not hundreds or thousands at this point, but I do have them. Why?
His sharp gaze didn't leave Rawers' form.
There is a technique we have tried before, but we never had the numbers or weapons needed to make it feasible. The warrior who tried died for no gain. But with your assistance, I might have an option.
This sounds good, but I can tell people are hungry. Let's eat. Nothing that he tells you is going to turn the tide of this war in the next day or so, is it? Tony asked, with a strangely assertive look. Not that she wasn't assertive, but there was something almost personal about it. Tony, what is going on? Later. Her response short and abrupt.
Given now, they need the food, and the longer they go without it, the crankier they get. One thing I've learned is cranky shifters are not fun.
Lawson's voice startled half the people there. He'd been so quiet.
He has a point, and I'm a bit hungry myself. I can't remember the last real meal I had.
Burby sighed, and it occurred to McKenna that sending people to their deaths might be harder than killing them yourself. JD, Purse, can you bring the chairs to the back deck? I can put the food in here buffet style, and everyone can get their food, then go out there. It's just as safe as anywhere else. If anything, we'll see or hear them coming sooner and have time to react. It was a measure of their paranoia that everyone came out with weapons, and even the agents relaxed with better lines of sight around the back deck. The kids exploded out of the house, still in human form, and expended energy on the playhouse. Aware of the people looking at her when she didn't stop the children, Tony shrugged. If all of us together can't protect them and let them play outside, we've already lost. The statement made everyone pay much closer attention, and we four went on high alert. Rawers, in our culture, very few people have the right to tell you what to wear or how to decorate your body. That is normally limited to parents, so you are free to remove or add wings as it feels comfortable to you.
What she said, McKenna commented, nodding her head and ignoring the mental snickers from the rest of her family.
Luckily, the Drakyn either didn't hear them or politely ignored them. Either was good with her.
Ah, then I shall remove the wings. It will make this space feel less confined.
McKenna didn't know if he intended it or not, but the way he said the word made it clear he felt a bit claustrophobic in here. And again, his head was only a foot or so from the ceiling. She had a good 3 feet plus. Heck, so did Person JD. His eyes closed, and she caught Tony out of the corner of her eye, peering through the kitchen doorway, fascinated. Karina watched behind her, curious, but not captivated the way Tony seemed to be. It took a minute, but the wings were absorbed back into his body. It still felt different than how they shifted, but right now it wasn't what she needed to ask questions about. Maybe later, if there was a later, she could find out more about why we four and the other nanobots were created, and why shifting worked the way it did. I've seen shifters change, but that's a new one on me. If things weren't so desperate to talk to you about other stuff, I'm sure I'd ask questions until you were ready to strangle me. Blair's voice embodied everything McKenna felt. She wanted to ask all her questions and address the confusion that surrounded this entire situation. But people were dying, and that mattered more right now. Philip Roberts shook his head and glanced down at his notepad.
Currently, we are fighting a war on multiple points, so we don't have any way to know where they'll be attacking at any given point or time.
We can't even figure out how they're narrowing in on shifters we have here in the U.S.
Oh, I can answer that, McKenna volunteered.
All eyes shifted over to her.
The nanobots have a slight isotopic radiation that the proper equipment can pick up. It isn't anything I or other shifters can do, but the people that designed these nanobots would be able to scan for and narrow down to where they are. Plus, clusters of shifters radiate stronger on the equipment than solos. Though from what we've been able to see, the powerful scanners are in the shuttles, while the handheld ones seem to be more for narrowing down locations.
Everyone stared at her. Even her friends. What? I told you I'd been talking to We4 about it. There wasn't anything we could do to block the scans, as we don't have the tech or the time to figure out a way. Telling all shifters to remain alone just puts more of them at risk, especially the kids. It's not like anyone in the government is talking to me on a regular basis. Oops. Did that sound a bit resentful? Okay, I guess being shuttled back here might have bugged me a little. Oh well. Burby ducked his head a bit, but didn't answer her. Everyone else just blinked. Finally, Gunny Roberts cleared his throat. Well, that does answer one question of how they're finding shifters. However, they still kill anyone between them and their target, and they are rapidly improving their techniques and their weapons. I hate to say this, but they are learning quickly and getting more deadly. McKenna sighed. She'd suspected that. It was getting harder to ambush them, and that didn't make it easier. Gunny looked up at Rowers, who still leaned on his tail and legs. It resembled calm patience that reminded McKenna of a hunting animal, content to wait until the time was right to attack. So that leads us back to the question. How can you help? Are there more of you coming? What else can you do besides shift? How can we fight them with the resources we have? Gunny Roberts asked the question in a calm and rational manner, but she could feel everyone tense as they focused even more directly on Rowers. He shrugged, and she could see how his wings would have moved with that movement. It felt like part of him was missing, but in his human form, it hadn't.
I am unsure. There is me. I might be able to get a few more warriors to assist. If we can make the Elentrin flee, I believe we can provide doctors and scientists afterward. But my people have very few that can fight or will fight. I am unsure of your resources, but as their ships are still in orbit above your planet, I assume you have no weapons to shoot them down. Doug snorted as Roberts answered. No, the majority of our weapons capable of making a dent on something the size of their ships have ballistic capabilities. Trying to shoot straight up or at things coming down won't work. The ships are too far away and our weapons are too slow. We don't have spaceships with weapons. While we could get a ship up there, we'd be lucky to get more than 3 or 4 people on it. And this goes for all countries, not just ours.
Rowers blew a long, steady exhalation through his nostrils. His equivalent of a sigh, she supposed.
I had figured as much.
So what good are you going to be? Burby snapped this out, leaning forward and staring at the Drakyn. Enough, Blair said, softly laying her hand on his arm. Burby subsided, rubbing and rubbed his head. He looked like he'd aged a decade in the weeks since she'd first met him. They all did.
You do have weapons, though?
Rowers asked slowly, his head swiveling back and forth between the people there.
Yes. Nuclear, biological, chemical, and then guns, which are a type of chemical weapon. We saw these on your media network. However, some of the content we were unsure if it was fiction or reality. It became confusing. For a while, we thought you had spaceships and energy weapons. But when we received word you were fighting back only with projectile weapons, we were disheartened.
McKenna watched Blair scribble another note on her pad, as did Roberts, but it seemed to be thoughts for later, as they just listened.
But you say you have nuclear weapons, and you obviously have warriors.
He waved at McKenna and her friends, with Perce and JD still in warrior form. Lawson shrank back, not wanting to garner attention as he enjoyed the luxury of a beer.
No.
We're not warriors. Lawson is a soldier. Us, we're just trying to protect our people, our children, our planet. But this is not what we want to do or are even trained to do, McKenna protested. Though lately it seemed all too easy to kill and lead. Easier than she wanted to admit, even to herself.
Ah. Can all Earthlings fight like you? Or do you have more soldiers to assist?
Gunny shrugged. Humans don't like to give up,
and most of us put up a fight. But yes, I have soldiers. Not hundreds or thousands at this point, but I do have them. Why?
His sharp gaze didn't leave Rawers' form.
There is a technique we have tried before, but we never had the numbers or weapons needed to make it feasible. The warrior who tried died for no gain. But with your assistance, I might have an option.
This sounds good, but I can tell people are hungry. Let's eat. Nothing that he tells you is going to turn the tide of this war in the next day or so, is it? Tony asked, with a strangely assertive look. Not that she wasn't assertive, but there was something almost personal about it. Tony, what is going on? Later. Her response short and abrupt.
Given now, they need the food, and the longer they go without it, the crankier they get. One thing I've learned is cranky shifters are not fun.
Lawson's voice startled half the people there. He'd been so quiet.
He has a point, and I'm a bit hungry myself. I can't remember the last real meal I had.
Burby sighed, and it occurred to McKenna that sending people to their deaths might be harder than killing them yourself. JD, Perce, can you bring the chairs to the back deck? I can put the food in here buffet style, and everyone can get their food, then go out there. It's just as safe as anywhere else. If anything, we'll see or hear them coming sooner and have time to react. It was a measure of their paranoia that everyone came out with weapons, and even the agents relaxed with better lines of sight around the back deck. The kids exploded out of the house, still in human form, and expended energy on the playhouse. Aware of the people looking at her when she didn't stop the children, Tony shrugged. If all of us together can't protect them and let them play outside, we've already lost. The statement made everyone pay much closer attention, and we four went on high alert. Chapter 7. Small Talk. So far, the United States has fared oddly well in this war. Our size, spread out population, and prevalence of gun owners has proved to be a saving grace. At this point, reports of shifters being captured in the U.S. has stayed under 200,000, though there are at least a reported 12,000 dead invaders and over 15,000 dead Americans. But overall, we are making them pay for everyone they kill and take. But they are learning. Stay under cover, be silent, don't gather in groups, and if you are a shifter, don't go out in warrior form. There are too many stories of killing friends and neighbors by accident. KWAC News. With JD, Perce, and Rawers helping, much to everyone's discomfort, couches and chairs were quickly moved outside, and plates of food were in their hands. Real, hot food that smelled good and tasted better than the canned and MREs they'd been eating for a week. Something that had been crying for attention relaxed as McKenna settled down. With home-cooked food in her mouth and the sound of kids playing surrounded her, she relaxed more than she had in weeks. I'm home. I missed this. Even so, the kids didn't scream as loud as they could have, and ears twitched at every sound. Even Rawers seemed to understand they needed to be wary. After the first rush of hunger had been sated, Robert sat with his hat neatly on his knee and his plate balanced over it. I'd so spill my food and ruin my hat.
So, what do you mean about a technique that didn't work before? At this point, if it isn't a suicide run, I think we would be willing to try it,
Philip replied, setting the empty plate down and reaching for his notebook. Karina flashed him a smile and took it in, her quiet presence soothing. McKenna just rolled her eyes and ate more. The shifters had plowed through the food, but the Drakyn had explored each food item offered him with thoughtful consideration. So far, the only thing he had wrinkled his muzzle at and set aside had been the sliced turkey breast, but the vegetables, beef, and fruit had been eaten swiftly. As Roberts had started to talk, he set his plate aside, though he held the glass of water with careful pressure between his large hands. His head turned to focus on the man. Wonder how he hears. I never researched reptiles to know how they can hear, but then I don't think he's a reptile. Though, for all I know, warm-blooded reptiles are possible. At least her thoughts still remained private as she munched on a piece of steak. The cooked, flavorful food made her feel better. Bland cooking made eating even more of a chore. JD and Cass were working their way through the fruit, and while she'd had a piece, it didn't call to her the same way it did them.
If I understand your term, a suicide run isn't exactly correct, but there are multiple things that must be considered, and many possible points of failure.
Rowers fell silent, then glanced around at all of them.
How much do you know about how my people travel across the stars?
McKenna didn't have a clue how they traveled, though the weird hole in space he had stepped out of implied a lot.
I know how to kill Drakyn, the most vulnerable areas in your warrior and worm form, what power to set the weapons at and when to bail,
JD said, shrugging his big furry shoulders. Strangely, McKenna wished the rest of them would shift back to human. It felt odd being human while 3 others were in warrior form. Cass laughed.
I don't know much about the Drakyn, but I know an awful lot about how they store Kaylid, the process to wipe the mines, the medtech, and suddenly how the nanobots and AIs are programmed. At some point, we'll need to talk.
Her voice had turned serious there at the end, and she had an odd look on her face. McKenna couldn't help it. She glanced at Perse and Tony. Perse shrugged.
I've got a bunch of info about their ships and technology, how the ships are laid out, but it's still expanding in my brain, so I don't know what I know yet.
Tony focused on her food, not looking at any of them. And after a minute, Rowers spoke, pulling the attention back to him.
Then I am taking that as a no, which is a good thing. If they had managed to understand how we travel without mechanics and replicate it, no one would be safe from them.
He paused again, popping a bit of fruit in his mouth.
This may come out disjointed, but many terms I cannot find in your languages. While we accessed some of your scientific data, it is harder to make sure the concepts are being translated and understood correctly without a scientist to discuss it with. You are the first Earthlings anyone has spoken with in a very long time.
Wait, Blair blurted. You've spoken to Earthlings before? When?
Oh, millennia by the way you tell time.
He glanced at Tony, then faced Blair again.
But that doesn't matter for the purpose of this conversation, though it may explain some of your legends. You have figured out the Elentrin were here once before, right?
Yes, around our dark ages, we think. The languages provided to the kids and expectations of the population density implied that much. Plus, it matches the timelines of stories about werewolves and whatnot, McKenna supplied. That much Charlie had helped them figure out.
Yes, the 4-legged canine has always been one of their favorites, though I have always thought the felines were more deadly.
Rowers shrugged.
But that is getting us off topic. My people have had a way to travel to other planets for as long as we have had language that lets us communicate anything. There is a theory your people are calling entanglement theory. It has flaws, but the basics are correct. I can find an element of space here and a matching element somewhere else. Between those two parts, I connect a path. A tunnel between the two, if you will. I can walk through that tunnel between one place and another.
How far can you travel? Roberts asked, making notes rapidly. Rowers shrugged.
I don't know that there is a limit. The farthest I have personally done is about 250 of your light years.
The adults all froze, various degrees of shock on their faces. Blair managed to squeak out a comment. And how long does that take? Rowers shrugged, a movement that still needed wings.
About 3 to 20 steps. Less than 5 heartbeats, for sure.
Everyone just looked at him until Burby shook his head.
Well, I want to dig into this, and the possibilities it opens up terrify and excite me. I'm not sure how this relates to the question at hand. How do we defeat the Elentrin? What does the way you travel have to do with this situation? Ah, yes. We tried a new strategy. The warrior that did it was killed quickly by Kaylid on the ship. But I believe it may work. We can open a portal from the ground here to one of their ships, allowing people to go through from the planet to the ship. I can keep the portal open even as the ship and planet move with little effort. After 2 or more of your hours, it will need to be reset. But anyone can use it while it is open.
The sounds of the kids laughing and playing softly on the playset was the only noise as everyone else processed this information. I'm sorry, I know I'm not a shifter or anything, but what does that mean? Karina was the one to break the silence as everyone sat there. Gunny Roberts, with an odd tone in his voice, replied,
It means we get to pull a Trojan horse maneuver, and they don't even need to open the gates to let us in.
Burby leaned back, a half smile on his face. Then he frowned.
Roberts, do you have the latest numbers for how many shifters have been taken?
U.S. or worldwide? Roberts pulled out his phone as he asked that question.
Worldwide.
A few taps, and Roberts replied,
These numbers are very rough, but we think about 1.7 million so far. At least half of those are Chinese, where at least 100,000 just walked onto the huge convoy shuttles. But new theories are rising that there are few shifters left that are easily available. The Elentrin are spreading out from the dense population centers of China. Many of the Chinese shifters were located in specific places, which were emptied in the first few shuttles. But the biggest issue is the military is under orders to help the invaders. So Korea and Taiwan look like they are about to be invaded.
He paused for a moment, looking thoughtful.
Given China's historical xenophobia, this says a lot about how powerful the pheromones work.
Burby leaned back, nodding, a frown on his face. Roberts shook his head, dismissing the thought, and continued.
Japan is actually pretty safe because outside of Tokyo, they don't have a huge population base, though they have lots of fox shifters. Granted, we are expecting Tokyo to fall fast. The Elentrin look too much like anime, and if they walk in with no shuttle and no warning, they'll have them under their command before anyone knows how to stop it. Though more places are adopting shoot-on-sight orders for anyone in warrior form or an Elentrin. But people affected by the pheromones seemed to carry the mesmerizing effect with them for a while. They can convince other people to aid them, and the people they talk to can fall under the same spell. Even with distance, the effect is hard to resist.
That was news to McKenna, but Rowers nodded.
Yes. It is a molecule that clings and will affect people for hours, even after casual contact. It is one of the ways they have managed to influence so many planets. My people are immune, as our reproductive systems are not affected by pheromones. Luckily. But if they continue to have issues with larger population planets, they will figure out how to aerosol them, or simply destroy the planets upon discovery.
Are there that many worlds with life on them? Blair's voice had a wistful tone to it, and Rowers turned to look at her, his eye ridges raised.
There are so many planets in this universe. Your language does not have words to express the numbers. Of the small handful we have visited over my race's lifetime, which is...
He paused for a minute, as if trying to remember something or talk to an AI.
23,241 planets. 15,783 have had life above invertebrate level. Of those, 354 have had sentient beings. The Elentrin have only managed to find about 75 of those planets. Of those, some were immune to their pheromones, and the nanobots didn't work on them. Others they have used. But of the planets they are aware of, Yours is the most technologically advanced, besides ours and their own.
The shocked stares were getting old, but McKenna felt like bombshells kept being dropped. There are other species out there that have achieved spaceflight? She had to ask. The old dreams of walking on another planet surfaced with a sudden pang.
Yes. Some are very advanced, but those have been either extremely xenophobic or felt there was no reason to enter what they felt was a private dispute. An odd expression crossed his face. Though we have noted in the seasons since we shared that information, they have all developed highly aggressive weapons platforms that the Elentrin would not be able to pass. Burby snorted. We know a few mindsets like that. So basically no one else is willing to help, and you figure since we're involved with this fight, we lose if we don't?
Rowers tilted his head.
If you wish to look at it that way. But you are the first planet with any fission or fusion weaponry that the Elentrin have sent a swarm to. We hoped we might be beneficial to each other. None of the other planets are at a point where even trade for more than occasional food goods or luxury items would be welcome. But you? That is not my area, but I see many things we might be willing to trade to help each other advance.
No Prime Directive issues? Blair asked, then rubbed her forehead. Sorry, it's a human phrase. Rowers made a warbling sound that must have been his laughter.
We did run across it. Your Wikipedia is useful. There are many that would pay for your fiction shows alone. No. While there are some in my government that might feel that way, the majority consensus is that all options are available when the Elentrin attack you. Yet we can't manage to fight back in any way that has any measurable effect. While I do not have the mindset to be a city manager, I am a warrior. That means I will use any tool, any weapon I can, to prevent my people from being killed. He touched his head. From all beings being killed, if possible.
Be that as it may, the ambassadors and shit can deal with you about that later. Right now, I'd like to get back to the plan. Which would be what? Roberts asked, his entire body focused on the dragon.
Well, understand I am not a tactician. That is not something warriors lean towards. We tend more to hit hard than move on, or what you call blitzkrieg actions.
He bobbed his head, and McKenna started to wonder if she was interpreting his body language incorrectly. We four? Do you know how to read him? Not at this time. Information is being collated.
Well, that's no help. Understood. Tell me what you tried and quit trying to weasel out of it.
Robert's voice snapped out, and McKenna saw JD's spine straighten and had to fight back a grin. In the space after the command, JD's and Perce's heads swiveled hard and sharp towards the fence.
Incoming,
JD said, in a low, deadly voice as he grabbed his gun. Chapter 8. Getting Personal. So far, no more news has come out about the U.S. efforts to get weapons into space to disable or destroy the Elentrin ship. At this point, we must give up all hope that those taken from us will ever be returned. If we do manage to get weapons up there, there will be no way to differentiate between the victims and the invaders. If we destroy that ship, we will kill our people too. What price do we pay to end this threat? TNN News, Op-Ed. McKenna spun and ordered the nanobots to her ears, even as she tried to locate what they were referencing. Her ears sharpened, and she could hear the sounds that indicated movement, which meant invaders were close by.
I can remove them?
Rowers offered, an odd tone to his voice as he stood, going to his full height at over 7 feet.
"No," Burby's voice barked. "You and the kids inside, and if you can get out of sight, do it. I don't want to take the risk of your existence being known."
To McKenna's surprise, Rowers looked at him, then her. She made a shooing motion with her hands. His being here could cause issues. He gave a sharp, brisk nod and strode towards the house. She felt something brush past her mind. And then the kids, who had frozen at the words, went tearing into the house. No panic, just speed. Everyone else grabbed weapons as Tony said quietly, "I'll go in and react to any incursion on the inside. I'll yell if I need help." By the time the words finished leaving her mouth, she was already inside. McKenna raised her weapon up and boosted the sensitivity of her ears a bit more, letting the bots shape them slightly to pull sound in better. That's useful even in human form. "The rest of you inside, too. Leave us out here to deal. You die too easily and are too important." She glanced at their visitors, but the agents were already chivying them back into the house. They'd make sure their charges stayed out of the way. Probably in the same room with Rowers or with the kids. Christopher gave her a sharp nod, and she realized she still hadn't told him. With a frustrated shake of her head, she moved her attention back to the fence. Now wasn't the time. "We have to kill all of them, fast, before they can communicate with anyone." Her mental voice was a sharp, flat order. "If we're lucky, they weren't close enough to hear the words, just that we were talking." "They'll smell him. He doesn't smell human." JD was right. Rowers smelled like an odd spice with a touch of fire and lightning mixed in with it. It was a recognizable smell. If any of the Kaylid coming after him had ever done a landing on a Drakyn-controlled planet, they would recognize it in a second. "All we can do is kill them fast. If they find out they're here, they won't wait for that other ship to get here. I'm pretty sure it should be here in the next day or so." Her tone grim. "Let's move toward them and see if we can eliminate them quickly." As one, they moved out towards the sounds that were only audible with their enhanced ears. The tall fence had nice rails on the back, and Perce took 2 running steps and smoothly landed on the rail of the fence, his clawed feet sinking into the wood a bit as he balanced. His whole body pivoted as he scanned the area, his AR-15 pointed in the direction he looked.
"Clear. Give yourself at least a foot on the other side to miss the bushes. That will put you in the neighbor's backyard. They're coming around from the front of the house."
That house was directly behind theirs, and it made sense if they were trying to approach under cover. What did you hear that made you realize they were coming? The invaders moved quietly, and she was surprised they weren't on top of them already. Over 2 minutes had passed since JD warned them. JD turned his head to the side a bit, trapping the side fence in his gaze.
"One of them stepped on something. It broke and it cursed. No one human is going to curse an Elentrin."
That would do it. "We ready for this?" McKenna commented, amused that cursing seemed to be a constant among all species.
"Hard and fast,"
Perce affirmed. McKenna let the men flow over the fence as she perched on top of the playset, scanning the area. While still in human form, she found it easier than ever to move like a Kaylid. Getting to the top and using the vantage point made so she could see the surrounding backyards and watch Perce and JD open fire as Kaylid came around the corners. In many ways, the fact they were so silent let them know they were invaders. Human Kaylid still tended to tromp through unless they were out hunting, like McKenna was, or were hunters before they were changed. Even as the furred head came around the corner, JD's M16 exploded into sound, and a rapid burst of 3 bullets, then another 3, and the body lay on the ground, a mass of red where its head had been. That signified the end of anyone being quiet, and the other 2 burst around the corner, firing as they went. JD sprang from his location behind a tree, even as Perce and McKenna both shot at the 2 figures coming in fast. The speed of Kaylid in battle could be breathtaking. Luckily, McKenna and Perce were just as fast, and their weapons had a better range. Perce's first shot missed as the Kaylid bobbed. His second caught it in the shoulder, and it fell. McKenna rose, standing up straight, even as Perce had to jump to the ground to avoid being shot. From her angle, she put 2 more 3-round bursts into the thrashing Kaylid's body, aiming for the head. It fell still, and she pivoted, tracking to where JD and the last Kaylid were fighting hand to hand. She cringed. That was never good. The Kaylid had implanted memories, and often had strength over the human shifters, as they weren't running into the calorie conservation issues. From what she had seen, they never left that form. While the last week had made them all good shots, shooting at 2 people in close proximity wasn't anything she was willing to risk. "Perce, can you help?" she asked, even as she tried to listen while pivoting on the top of the play structure in the backyard, and trying to sense if anything else was headed their way, while using the noise as a cover.
"On it. Watch our backs."
McKenna wanted to roll her eyes. If it hadn't been a literal life-or-death fight, she might have. Of course I'll watch your back. What, like, I'm willing to let any of you get hurt? The Kaylid JD fought was one of the more lizardy ones that had been in some of the Not dreams. Not a scaled one like Raour's, but more leathery skin. Lizard probably wasn't the right word, but it reminded her of what they thought dinosaurs would look like at one point. Either way, it had a tail and claws that made Cass's look almost boring, and it seemed to be vicious. Desperate. Maybe there isn't a difference anymore. They have as little choice in this as we do. The thought hit her with a wave of guilt that she pushed aside. All they could do was their best, and the fastest way to quit killing beings, people, who had no choice in this war, was to end it. Perce had dropped his rifle on a table as he launched himself towards the back of the Kaylid, while at the same time saying in the mind space, "Coming in! Don't let him turn you."
"Got it."
JD pulled, and the Kaylid fell off balance a bit. JD, even underweight, looked like he had 20 pounds on him, and at this point, it was all muscle, and it made a difference. Perce slammed into the Kaylid with claws out, shoving them into its back where the heart would have been in a human. It screamed. Before, most of the fight had been relatively silent. But now, it screamed a high-pitched sound that hurt McKenna's ears, and must have been torture on JD's and Perce's. "Shit, it didn't kill it," Perce muttered, as he fought to yank his claws back out of the being. JD roared, and McKenna saw blood streaming from his side. The Kaylid's tail whipped up and slammed into Perce from below, lifting him, and she heard him grunt in pain. "Damn it, finish it, guys, before you get hurt or others come." JD growled mentally at her, but her stress and worry as she kept pivoting didn't allow her to feel guilty for the ridiculous order. As she scanned back to their fight, she saw JD had sunk his huge jaws around the creature's neck, cutting off its airflow. Meanwhile, Perce had slammed both sets of claws into the Kaylid's skull. The awful scream had stopped, and it slumped to the ground, a limp, greenish-gray bag of flesh bleeding from multiple wounds. "You okay?" "No. I have at least 3 broken bones, and JD has some wicked cuts. But we'll live." Perce's mental voice felt gray and dank. It bugged her. But then, this entire thing sucked. A creak of sound had them looking up, muscles tensing, ready to attack again. The back door of the yard they were fighting in had creaked open, a tiny bit, and an elderly woman, her once black hair streaked with gray, looked at them and nodded. "Take them and dump them out front on the driveway. I'll call a pickup." She started to close the door, then paused, looking back at them, eyes magnified by thick lenses. "Good job." The door shut, and it was all silent again. "Hey, at least not everyone is against us," JD said, as he stood, blood still leaking from wounds. "They never were. We'll get the bodies moved, then we'll need some food. I've got my bot working overtime to fix this stuff. Remind me in the future to shoot them from a distance. This close-up stuff is brutal, and they're better trained than we are." Perce sounded distracted as he looked around. "What he said." JD's voice sounded exhausted and in pain, but McKenna stayed where she was, watching and listening as they moved the bodies out front. She didn't get down from her perch until she heard them go in the front door, at which point she dropped off the swing set and headed to the deck. Not relaxing, but feeling a bit better. The back door opened before she got there, and Doug and Philip walked out, their faces unreadable. They firmly shut the door before focusing on her. "We need to talk." Chapter 9. Bombshells.
The fashion and recognition adornments started by McKenna Largo have gone all but viral. Wait times for piercings are upwards of 4 hours at this point. The gaudier the better is the word of the day. As one shifter put it, "I want you to see me coming a mile away." After looking at her LED flashing neon green earring, we feel her purpose may be achieved. But will it make a difference in the long run? Only time will tell. And that is the one thing Earth seems to be running out of. TNN Invasion News.
McKenna sighed at the SecDef's words and leaned back against the railing. She could hear Perce and JD talking to each other in the mind space as they dealt with their wounds in the house. Cass and Tony were fussing over them, and Blair was excited. While normal habit caused them to share spoken words in the space, though they still hadn't figured out how you auto-translated other people's words into the shared space, we four just sighed when asked and would launch into a technical explanation that had everyone's eyes glazing over in seconds. Except Cass's. At this point, McKenna chalked it up to nanobots and moved on. She was close enough she could easily hear them talking if she focused on it, even through the door and with them in another room. But that took too much effort right now, though she did crank down her hearing a bit. About? Her voice wary. The familiar adrenaline drop was hitting, and she wanted something to munch on, even if she hadn't expended as many calories.
"Can we trust him?"
Burby asked, his voice blunt. Amusement washed through McKenna. You realize if his hearing is anything like ours in either form, he can probably hear us clearly out here. Philip paled a bit, and his eyes twitched to the door while Burby rubbed his temples.
Doesn't matter if he can. The question remains the same. Can we trust him?
How in the world should I know? I've known him for, 2 hours longer than you have? I don't have the slightest idea. But does it really matter? They had gritted their teeth a bit at her comment, then frowned, looking at her.
"What does that mean?" Philip demanded.
He didn't get into her personal space or try to intimidate her, which she both appreciated, and it put him a few rungs above General Arnold. It means, unless there's a ton of plans being made, we don't have a choice. Silence from both men met her words, and she wanted to beat her head against the wall. Guys, I listen to the news. I've been out there. You yourself told me about the trucks and huge food shortages. We're facing an infrastructure breakdown if we can't get people moving around safely. You heard rowers talking about them getting the asteroids ready to launch at us? And what happened to the last planet?
How do we know that isn't just a bluff? Something to get us to believe him. One, the person, or whatever, that has been sending us the weird dreams and stuff, mentioned they were planning on it. We're becoming too much effort. But they have another ship coming first. They'll try to load it up before doing anything else. And besides, haven't your scientists or astro guys or whatever mentioned the ships are gathering asteroids from the belt and positioning them around Earth? They looked at each other, and Burby pulled out his phone. A minute later, he started to cuss softly. She's right. They've spotted them heading back and forth from the belt between Mars and Jupiter with objects, but no one put it together. McKenna tried to remember when she knew about the asteroids, and if she had ever passed it on or even mentioned it to the captain. But the mix of memories, dreams, talking in mind space, and something rowers had said, all blended, and finally she shook her head. So bottom line, it doesn't matter. If he is tricking us, why? We're losing and have nothing to use against asteroids being flung at our planet.
Even if humanity isn't absolutely destroyed, what's left will be pushed back to survival level, and we won't have anything we can do about anything. Philip swallowed hard, and then straightened up a bit more. Well, then it sounds like we should get to work with our new ally and see how this crazy plan of his might let us strike back. He started to turn to the door and paused. Sir, why did you ask how many people had already been taken by the Elentrin? Burby snorted, running his hand over his head. He needed a shave, McKenna noted. Because we need to rescue them. If we just blow up the ships with close to 1 million people on them, the world will crucify us. If we try to rescue them and fail, that's one thing. But if we don't try at all, he shrugged. I'm not sure I could live with that either. But we need to stop them, and fast. He looked at McKenna. How long do we have? She shrugged. Not sure. I think the other ship will be here any day. Philip paled a bit. I have to figure out how to launch an attack against ships in orbit around us, with an ally we don't know if we can trust, with a technique we can't quite believe, in less than 48 hours? Burby gave him a humorless smile. Adapt, improvise, and overcome. We have people to save. But look on the bright side. If it works, we can destroy these incoming ships before they start loading our people on them. Less collateral damage. McKenna winced. Doug? He turned to look at her and got a wary look on his face. Yes? Just remember. Most of the Kaylid are slaves. They don't have a choice. And if I'm right, Ash loaded Cass with information on how to break or at least override their conditioning. Besides, if how she's described the containment facilities are correct, we won't know who's from Earth and who's from elsewhere. They're mostly stored in Kaylid forms. We need to rescue as many as we can. Both men just looked at her blankly, and she shrugged. I know, but could you kill sleeping people who have no desire to do anything but to go home if they could? Not saying we shouldn't fight and kill, just pointing out we'll be rescuing them regardless because we won't always know if they're from Earth. What do you mean, always know? Roberts asked, looking at her sharply. She could see the wheels turning in his head, and tilted her head back to where they had killed the 2 Kaylid. One of the ones we killed was a reptile or dinosaur-like. Leathery skin, no fur, with a thicker tail. Not mammal-like all earth-shifters that I've heard of. But do you really want to take the time to evaluate each Kaylid you find to decide if they are friend or foe? Knowing that our only real foes look like elves from an anime tale? I'm starting to understand why Burby dreads speaking to you. You complicate everything by doing the right thing. He suddenly grinned and tugged down his uniform. I always wanted to be Heracles. I guess this is one of my legendary tasks. But the clock is ticking, and standing here with our thumbs up our asses won't get it done. Philip pulled open the door and strode into the kitchen. Laurent, we're going to need the commanders of the local garrisons. We have multiple bases near here, so we can start pulling in troops. Get someone on the phone and tell them we're going to need people. Details to follow in a few hours. But prepare for heavy, fast loads. We're going to need medics and places to put a lot of people. Laurent nodded and pulled out his phone. Stadiums, Tony said, her voice quiet. She stood by the front door, looking out it, rifle in hand. Excuse me? Gunny Roberts looked at her confused. Get a stadium. You can get a lot of people in it, both in the seats and the field. Not to mention the tunnels underneath have lots of rooms. Some with places that are almost medical quality. What she said. Most people never see the underside of the stadiums, but the professional level ones will have the next thing to surgical suites in them. They're set up to treat lots of injuries and have showers. First backed up Tony's comment. After all, I've been in enough of them. Point. Laurent, add that to your list. Now. Philip paused and moved his attention to Rowers. We need to talk about exactly how this will work. You have decided to trust me? Or realized there are no other options? Rowers' tone remained gentle, but there was an echo of laughter that brushed up against the mindscape. Told you he'd be able to hear us, McKenna said, as she sank into a recliner. Nam climbed on top of her and wrapped her arms around her neck, holding on tight. Rowers glanced at the little girl, and his brows drew together. But before he could say anything, Philip started. We only have a short amount of time. Between the incoming Elentrin and the asteroids, we need to move fast. The stadiums will help, but we'll have lots of confused beings to deal with. And doesn't that just feel odd saying? He shook his head and glanced down at his notebook. But before we can do anything, I need to know exactly what your limitations are. So we can Trojan horse inside. How long can you keep it open? How many people? What are our options? Rowers tilted his head all the way back, looking at the ceiling.
There is a story from my past of a Drakyn opening a tunnel between two planets and moving an entire people through it. I have personally allowed 2 or 3 to go through, but I've never tested how long I can hold it open. But when I have had others go through, I've never noticed a difference. That is an answer I cannot provide, but I would assume it is a long time and many people. If it fails or is disrupted, how long to reconnect or make a new tunnel? Less than 1 of your minutes.
Philip grimaced. Which, if you are under fire, might be an eternity. What are you thinking? Rowers paused and half shrugged.
This is where I need your assistance. We have no strategy training. Most planets we have interacted with are agrarian, peaceful. We have technology, but we have never used it the way your history shows. In many ways, you are the most violent race we have ever seen. You kill each other and fight for sport. Even the Elentrin don't see violence as fun, only necessary. The only reason Ash's people knew how to attack was we had warned them generations ago. But they realized the danger too late, and attacking ships in space is harder than we had known. Yeah, so we're finding. We make it through this, I can promise you every country in the world will be developing a space defense program.
Burby's voice was a bit bitter, but he shrugged.
What are you thinking, Philip?
That we're probably all going to die? He sighed and looked at his notebook. But it was obvious he wasn't really seeing it. Get a few good SEAL or Ranger teams together. Tight squads that know how to work as a unit. Get in, plant bombs, get out. But that leaves the rescuing part.
There is another complication.
Rowers' voice might have been apologetic. Almost. McKenna felt herself brace for what he was about to say, her arms tightening slightly on Nam.
McKenna and her group will need to come with us. This will fail without them.
The words fell like bricks in the room, and Philip groaned as he turned to look at the shifters.
No offense, but regardless of the last week, you aren't trained for this. You don't know how to work with a team, and I doubt you have any experience with setting bombs or clearing rooms.
No offense taken, you're right. That isn't anything we know how to do, though I'll tell you fighting in warrior form is another skill set entirely. She looked at Rowers, who almost looked sheepish.
Why do we have to come?
Tony's bitter laugh was a slap across the face, and McKenna glanced at her, surprised. What is wrong with her? I have to find time to talk to her. Isn't it obvious? Everyone looked at her blankly. The knowledge we were preloaded with. Cass knows how to get people out of the canisters or tubes or whatever. Without her, all the people you want to rescue will probably get killed by their rescuers. She did air quotes around people as she talked. Perce already said he knows the ship. That means he knows where to go and where the best spots for the bombs will be, where to disable and where to destroy things. Her smile twisted, and McKenna flinched back. We need McKenna because of the AI living in her head. I'll lay money it can understand most of the systems faster than we can, not to mention the languages and resources. Then there's me. Her eyes had a haunted look, and McKenna didn't know whether she should close her eyes to block them out or get up and hug her. I have all the access codes to the various sections of the ship, and I should be able to register myself as a super user. Somehow, he programmed it to recognize me. So yes, you need all of us. And I have to leave my kids. Again! Everyone stared at her, and she whirled to look out the window, her body stiff and tense. I'm sorry, McKenna whispered in her mind, wanting to cry for her friend, her pack. Tony's shoulders trembled for a moment, then relaxed. Not your fault. It is what it is. If we don't do this, our planet will be destroyed. Then my children will be dead anyhow, so at this point, it doesn't matter. When she turned back around, her face was set, and McKenna squeezed Nam so hard the little girl protested.
I know we have disrupted your lives, but truly, we were unable to think of any other way. Ash and I tried once before, but we couldn't get the ones we connected with to believe the dreams or me. They were taken before we could convince anyone. You have come further than anyone the Elentrin have faced before.
Rawers' voice in the mindscape rolled through like a low thrum, and she saw Tony's eyes widen a bit. But before they could end their weird staring contest, Philip spoke.
I don't know if this will make you feel better, but you just became the most important people on the planet. Which means we're instantly moving you to a secure facility, and we're going to start planning the attack as soon as we can get the pieces together. That means you need to work with teams, learning their tactics, and they need to get to know you.
He cast a critical eye at Perse, JD, and Rawers.
And you need to get some equipment that will fit you. While you might be able to do that mental thingy that the SecDef told me about, the rest of the team can't. We're going to need to go over the schematics and figure out the types of explosives to take. Either way, we need to get you out of here and soon. We don't have time, and I hope you don't need sleep.
McKenna laughed bitterly.
We do, but we need food, and have learned to sleep when we can, but we'll figure it out.
She stood up and looked around. Let's pack up and get out of here. Karina came out from the kitchen, a worried look on her face as she headed upstairs. Tony followed her to get the kids all packed back up. If it took them more than an hour, she'd be surprised. McKenna started to put Nam down so she could go help when Rawers stepped over to her. She stopped still, holding Nam in her arms. Philip and Burby were both talking on their phones in rapid-fire orders, trying to make this work, while JD and Perse had headed out to start loading up the car. Lawson went with them, his eyes wide and looking a bit freaked.
Welcome to the big leagues. I wish I could go home. Even the media circus and the drug sniffing seemed easier than this. I never thought I'd wish I was back in that place again, being watched 24/7. But at least then I knew exactly what to do. Now, I don't have a clue. May I speak with you about the child?
He didn't whisper. His voice didn't sound like it could whisper, but he kept it soft and nodded towards the kitchen. Thoughts and reactions boiled in McKenna's mind, but she nodded and headed into the kitchen, her body on a fine point, ready to attack if he so much as made a move towards the little girl. Nam had turned her head, watching him, her gaze intent.
Is she your child?
No, but I won't let anything happen to her. He tilted his head one way, then the other.
That is not my intent. She feels different than the rest of you. Have you noticed?
Feel? What is he talking about? Since you haven't touched her, I assume you mean something else when you say feel? Nam's voice surprised her.
He's funny feeling. He's all sun and sand and wind. It tickles.
McKenna glanced down at Nam. That wasn't the first comment she'd made that made no sense. But then what did she know about kids? Nam was just a different child all around.
Thank you, little one.
His scaled lips curved a bit, but didn't expose teeth as his eyes, swirling with colors, moved to look at McKenna.
No, I suppose you would not sense it. It will not matter now. Maybe not for years. And it will never matter if the Elentrin are not defeated. But she is special. Only a few rare of my people can taste the colors of the mind. They usually become healers or luminaries. She could be one if she wanted. She has the skills.
A large clawed hand reached out, and McKenna fought to not pull the child away. But Nam reached out her own hand and traced the claw and fingers that looked like they could kill her with a casual wave.
Be aware. She will be more sensitive than most nestlings. And as she grows, she will expand her ability to read and control. I've never heard of a Kaylid developing this, but she has Drakyn in her, as do you all.
Wait, what? Chapter 10. First Domino.
In the 5 states that have recreational pot sales as legal, every distribution center has sold out. The few people willing to talk all had similar comments. I have nothing to lose, and if this helps lower my stress level, why not? It is interesting to note that while crime has come to a standstill across the board, there has been no attempt by law enforcement to pursue any drug use at this time, and the White House has been unavailable for comment.
TNN News. McKenna just looked at him. We have Drakyn in us?
Of course. That is the only reason their nanobots work. At some point, our ancestors visited here, bred with your species, and time and generations have diffused the effect. But Nam has more than a normal amount. And Tony?
Rauer shrugged.
I always wondered if the Elentrin knew that the only reason their little machines worked was because of our genetic material in their victims. And if ultimately, all of this is our fault. Maybe we should have just killed them all that first day.
Kill who? McKenna blurted. Come on, people, we need to get packed and out of here. We have another vehicle that will be here in 10. Or worse, I need to discuss your needs with you before we leave. Philip's voice radiated from the living room with the power of a drill sergeant.
It is immaterial at this time. This is history so old, it lives only in our legends.
With another half nod, Rauers turned and went back, his tail following him with an odd grace. My life is so strange. Weefor, is that true? She asked in the mind space, as she headed to do a quick pack. Not that she had much to do. At the top of the stairs, she set the squirming Nam down, who raced to help Karina and the others get their stuff all packed up. She could feel the kids' excitement. They still found all of this fun. The adults, on the other hand, were grim, and Tony brimmed with helpless rage at the situation they found themselves in. There is no reason it cannot be true. There is no information in the databases to indicate they are aware of it. Only that they tried it and it would not work on Elentrin, but did work on a subject race they had found at one point in their history. One of their ships went back to test it on the indigenous people, and the Kaylid were created to fight the Drakyn.
I see. Which may or may not be the way it happened. Victors rewrite history a lot. And I guess it doesn't matter. It still doesn't change the situation.
Pushing that to the side, she headed to where Tony had been sleeping and found the woman shoving things into her suitcase. Every move jerky.
Tony?
At this point, talking out loud might give them more privacy.
I know. This is the best hope we have. That if I stayed, we would probably all die, and by all, I mean all humans. I know that I'm being silly. I know they'll protect the kids to the best of their abilities. I know all of that. Her voice broke on a sob. And I still don't want to go. They're changing so fast. Becoming people in their own right, not just my kids. And I'm terrified that I'll miss that. I'm terrified something will happen and I won't be here to take care of them, to hold them, listen to them sleep. And I can't do anything about it. And I didn't choose any of this. McKenna pulled on her shoulder gently, and Tony turned around, tears streaking her face. With a sad smile, McKenna pulled her into her arms and held Tony while she cried. After a minute, she joined in too. Charlie and Nam had become so important, and now she was leaving them again with strangers. She let her own tears come and washed them both clean of some stress. She could feel the kids monitoring them, but they didn't come in, letting them deal with their grief. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, Tony sniffed and pulled back. Thanks. I guess I needed that. I'll be okay. You're one of the strongest women I know. Of course you'll be okay. But that doesn't mean you can't hurt, McKenna pointed out. Pot? Kettle? Tony said with a wry smile. I know how you feel about Charlie and Nam, so don't tell me this isn't killing you also. It is. I want to be here with them. She's only 6, so I get it. But not being here hurts. However, if I don't try to do something and we then all die, McKenna shrugged. I'm torn. So I'm doing what I can. Tony wiped her nose. You're doing fine. Okay, enough emotions. We have stuff to do, then an enemy to kick out of our solar system. You sure you're okay? No, but I'll make it. Trust me. Compared to Jeff dying, this I know I can handle. I just needed that cry, I guess. Tony turned away and started packing again, her movements smoother and more efficient. Good. Next question. What's up with you and the Drakyn? Tony froze at the question, then sighed and turned around. That obvious? Just weird. You don't usually react like that, so what's the issue? McKenna started to help her pack up things. They were running out of time, and she could hear the others running around, getting things together. When I saw him walking out of that portal, I almost choked. It was like my dreams had been made real. How did you see that? You weren't there. McKenna looked at her in surprise, but remembered the strange feeling at the time. No, but we got the comments you made, and I was stressing. I wanted to see what was going on, especially with Perce and JD muttering, like whispers in the mindscape. Tony frowned. I just wanted to see so badly. And suddenly it was like I was there, but the view was odd. It lasted only for a minute or two, but I couldn't focus on anything except him.
We can do that too,
Charlie said softly. McKenna turned to look at him. She hadn't realized he'd been in the hall.
Do what?
Tony stared at him with the same confusion McKenna felt.
See through others' eyes. I mean, I can only see through Jessie's, but Jamie can see through hers also. We haven't tried with Nam. She's too new to us, but
yeah, we found that out. He shrugged and looked away from them. Just heard you talking about it and thought I'd tell you. But it is kind of cool. We're all packed up, so where are we going now? He didn't seem too stressed, and McKenna wondered how much of his life had been being shipped from place to place. Is this better for him? Or am I making it worse? Unable to resist, she snaked out an arm and pulled her to him in a side hug. You guys okay with all this change? Sure. Well, this is fun. Dragons, aliens, army guys, invaders. It's like being in a movie. He grinned up at her and she rolled her eyes. If you say so. Go get your stuff downstairs. I think we're moving to a base. Oh, will we get to stay in barracks? That would be awesome. Charlie looked excited at the idea, and Tony snorted. Maybe. I'll ask. Now get. She shooed him off, and he darted into the nearby bedroom, grabbed a bag, and lugged it down the stairs. Jessie and Nam followed with smaller bags. I think I'm jealous. They think this is fun, and I don't want to disabuse them of that idea, McKenna commented as she watched them trot down the stairs. But now, she said, turning back to Tony. Rawers. Spill. Damn it. I was hoping you'd been sidetracked. Tony didn't look at her as she finished putting things in the bag. Not so lucky. Spill. But do it in my bedroom so I can pack. Tony followed McKenna as she began to throw things into her bag. So, yeah, the dragon walking out of a big shiny portal was a bit of a surprise, but nothing like the fact that I recognized him. What? McKenna looked up, trying to separate dirty and clean clothes. She hadn't even had a shower yet. All my life, I dreamed of dragons. Both as humanoid and on all fours. Honestly, when I shifted, I was surprised I didn't turn into a dragon. But who tells people that stuff? I just pushed it away and focused on being a kid, then being an adult, then a mom. It was silly dreams, and not like I had them every night. Tony shrugged as she grabbed stuff out of the closet. I'd almost forgotten them, and I haven't had them for years. The dreams on the ship pushed them to the side, I guess. So when he walked out, I almost choked. What do you think it means? No clue. Other than me being weird? But really, there are only so many ways dragons can look. I doubt I dreamed about him specifically. Probably just a weird parallel thing. I mean, a dragon and aliens and shifters. She trailed off as she said that, and McKenna looked at her sideways. Personally, I think it would be stranger at this point if they weren't linked. Besides, he keeps looking at you funny also, as if he knows you. Tony groaned. Oh, I hate it when you're right. She looked around. That looks like everything. They could hear the people clearing out. I'll talk to him later. If we survive, it might matter. Now, I'll try to quit freaking out every time I see him. But he looks wrong without the wings. McKenna grinned. Agreed. But still, it was getting a bit claustrophobic with them. He uses them the way I use my tail in both my forms. That he does. Anything else? Everyone good? Everyone got everything? She asked, checking with everyone.
Finishing up the last of the kitchen stuff now. The place will be a bit of a mess, but we don't have time to clean it,
Cass said. Yeah, they have another vehicle on the way, and we have the Suburban, the car that was here, and the one Burby's crew came in. We're leaving all the bags in the garage, and they'll collect them for us. The kids are already in the car. It's the only one with booster seats for the three of them, so we just need to know where we're going. Perce had his steady, everything will be fine cadence to his voice, and it made her feel a bit better. McKenna cast a glance to Tony, who shrugged. They grabbed their bags and headed downstairs. Rowers stood in the living room, out of sight of any person who might be passing by. Philip was giving Rowers a considering look, then frowned at Perce and JD. Is there an issue? All of you are huge and not inconspicuous, and I really don't want anyone to know we have you here. You don't look like a Kaylid, even without the wings. He glanced back at Perce and JD. Very noticeable, especially among a bunch of humans. Hey, we're human too. McKenna couldn't stop the snappish response. Roberts snapped to attention. Yes, ma'am. I didn't mean to imply you weren't, ma'am. Just that you are obvious. He stood not looking at her, his eyes over her shoulder. McKenna sighed. I know, but all of us can change back to human. We'll just need food to replenish the energy. Perce, JD, you okay to change? You have enough reserves for a shift? They both stood there a minute, then nodded. Yeah. Not going to say I won't need calories to change back. I'm still underweight, but should be fine, JD said, shrugging one shoulder. All of you? Wait. Rowers can change too? Philip had lost the rigid attention pose. Yes. The wings were just too much in that small space. McKenna frowned, then remembered that Rowers had changed before the men got there for the awe factor. Rowers, however, was looking back and forth between them. Why are you worried about caloric intake? Do you not store spare mass in your quantum spaces? With his brow ridges furrowed, McKenna figured that was his equivalent of a confused face. I wonder if all species in humanoid forms have similar expressions. And what the heck is he talking about? Before she could voice that, Perce did. Oh, what are you talking about, quantum space? Storing mass? Rowers paused, his head moving from one to another, looking at them. Pardon the intrusion, but how do you change now? McKenna tilted her head, now totally confused. We have nanobots that do it, and they burn calories to fuel themselves to restructure our cellular structure. The Drakyn blinked at them, both sets of eyelids closing and opening rapidly. That is horribly inefficient and a waste of caloric energy. Why would you do it like that? His voice sounded astonished, and McKenna laughed. You think we have a choice? We didn't have a choice in any of this. All we can do is deal with what we've been handed. She paused, looking at him. Are you saying there's a different way to do this? This isn't how you do it. He opened and closed his mouth 2 times in a row before finally responding. I apologize. I must think about this. I do not know how to deal with this information and what it implies, much less how to explain to you. Give me some time. Philip looked at them. Okay, if that's done, can all of you shift and get back to something no one will look at twice? Besides, I'll need the shifting later to help impress people. As long as you have food there to fuel our shift back, it really isn't an issue, JD offered, and Perce nodded. I'll make a note, please. The gunny actually asked, not ordered. Points for him. Her friend shrugged and started to change, flowing back into human, looking grimy and tired.
Interesting. Yes, much to consider.
Rowers watched all of this with sharp eyes. Then he, too, let himself change. Once again, McKenna noted that he felt different when he shifted. But she couldn't say what felt different. Just that it wasn't like watching or feeling any of hers shift. It felt smoother, like silk against skin. And then a man, dark-haired and powerful, but so undeniably human, stood in front of them.
How do you know our form so well? Or is it that easy for you to change?
Cass asked from the doorway, as Blair Lewis stood next to her, the curiosity in their eyes matching pairs.
I have practiced since my majority. The dreams I shared with Tonan Diaz gave me the templates to change into in my later years.
Tony sucked in a sharp breath at her full name, and Rowers looked at her.
We should talk later, once your world is safe.
His words rang deeper and wider than should have been possible, ringing like a bell in McKenna's soul. Yeah, was all Tony said as she turned and headed out the door, not looking at anyone. Chapter 10. First Domino.
In the 5 states that have recreational pot sales as legal, every distribution center has sold out. The few people willing to talk all had similar comments. I have nothing to lose, and if this helps lower my stress level, why not? It is interesting to note that while crime has come to a standstill across the board, there has been no attempt by law enforcement to pursue any drug use at this time, and the White House has been unavailable for comment.
TNN News. McKenna just looked at him. We have Drakyn in us?
Of course. That is the only reason their nanobots work. At some point, our ancestors visited here, bred with your species, and time and generations have diffused the effect. But Nam has more than a normal amount. And Tony?
Rowers shrugged.
I always wondered if the Elentrin knew that the only reason their little machines worked was because of our genetic material in their victims. And if ultimately, all of this is our fault. Maybe we should have just killed them all that first day.
Kill who? McKenna blurted. Come on, people, we need to get packed and out of here. We have another vehicle that will be here in 10. Or worse, I need to discuss your needs with you before we leave. Philip's voice radiated from the living room with the power of a drill sergeant.
It is immaterial at this time. This is history so old, it lives only in our legends.
With another half nod, Rowers turned and went back, his tail following him with an odd grace. My life is so strange. Weefor, is that true? She asked in the mind space, as she headed to do a quick pack. Not that she had much to do. At the top of the stairs, she set the squirming Nom down, who raced to help Karina and the others get their stuff all packed up. She could feel the kids' excitement. They still found all of this fun. The adults, on the other hand, were grim, and Tony brimmed with helpless rage at the situation they found themselves in. There is no reason it cannot be true. There is no information in the databases to indicate they are aware of it. Only that they tried it and it would not work on Elentrin, but did work on a subject race they had found at one point in their history. One of their ships went back to test it on the indigenous people, and the Kaylid were created to fight the Drakyn.
I see. Which may or may not be the way it happened. Victors rewrite history a lot. And I guess it doesn't matter. It still doesn't change the situation.
Pushing that to the side, she headed to where Tony had been sleeping and found the woman shoving things into her suitcase. Every move jerky.
Tony?
At this point, talking out loud might give them more privacy.
I know. This is the best hope we have. That if I stayed, we would probably all die, and by all, I mean all humans. I know that I'm being silly. I know they'll protect the kids to the best of their abilities. I know all of that. Her voice broke on a sob. And I still don't want to go. They're changing so fast. Becoming people in their own right, not just my kids. And I'm terrified that I'll miss that. I'm terrified something will happen and I won't be here to take care of them, to hold them, listen to them sleep. And I can't do anything about it. And I didn't choose any of this. McKenna pulled on her shoulder gently, and Tony turned around, tears streaking her face. With a sad smile, McKenna pulled her into her arms and held Tony while she cried. After a minute, she joined in too. Charlie and Nam had become so important, and now she was leaving them again with strangers. She let her own tears come and washed them both clean of some stress. She could feel the kids monitoring them, but they didn't come in, letting them deal with their grief. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, Tony sniffed and pulled back. Thanks. I guess I needed that. I'll be okay. You're one of the strongest women I know. Of course you'll be okay. But that doesn't mean you can't hurt, McKenna pointed out. Pot? Kettle? Tony said with a wry smile. I know how you feel about Charlie and Nam, so don't tell me this isn't killing you also. It is. I want to be here with them. She's only 6, so I get it. But not being here hurts. However, if I don't try to do something and we then all die, McKenna shrugged. I'm torn. So I'm doing what I can. Tony wiped her nose. You're doing fine. Okay, enough emotions. We have stuff to do, then an enemy to kick out of our solar system. You sure you're okay? No, but I'll make it. Trust me. Compared to Jeff dying, this I know I can handle. I just needed that cry, I guess. Tony turned away and started packing again, her movements smoother and more efficient. Good. Next question. What's up with you and the Drakyn? Tony froze at the question, then sighed and turned around. That obvious? Just weird. You don't usually react like that, so what's the issue? McKenna started to help her pack up things. They were running out of time, and she could hear the others running around, getting things together. When I saw him walking out of that portal, I almost choked. It was like my dreams had been made real. How did you see that? You weren't there. McKenna looked at her in surprise, but remembered the strange feeling at the time. No, but we got the comments you made, and I was stressing. I wanted to see what was going on, especially with Perce and JD muttering, like whispers in the mindscape. Tony frowned. I just wanted to see so badly. And suddenly it was like I was there, but the view was odd. It lasted only for a minute or two, but I couldn't focus on anything except him.
We can do that too,
Charlie said softly. McKenna turned to look at him. She hadn't realized he'd been in the hall.
Do what?
Tony stared at him with the same confusion McKenna felt.
See through others' eyes. I mean, I can only see through Jessie's, but Jamie can see through hers also. We haven't tried with Nam. She's too new to us, but
yeah, we found that out. He shrugged and looked away from them. Just heard you talking about it and thought I'd tell you. But it is kind of cool. We're all packed up, so where are we going now? He didn't seem too stressed, and McKenna wondered how much of his life had been being shipped from place to place. Is this better for him? Or am I making it worse? Unable to resist, she snaked out an arm and pulled her to him in a side hug. You guys okay with all this change? Sure. Well, this is fun. Dragons, aliens, army guys, invaders. It's like being in a movie. He grinned up at her and she rolled her eyes. If you say so. Go get your stuff downstairs. I think we're moving to a base. Oh, will we get to stay in barracks? That would be awesome. Charlie looked excited at the idea, and Tony snorted. Maybe. I'll ask. Now get. She shooed him off and he darted into the nearby bedroom, grabbed a bag and lugged it down the stairs. Jessie and Nam followed with smaller bags. I think I'm jealous. They think this is fun, and I don't want to disabuse them of that idea, McKenna commented as she watched them trot down the stairs. But now, she said, turning back to Tony. Rawers. Spill. Damn it. I was hoping you'd been sidetracked. Tony didn't look at her as she finished putting things in the bag. Not so lucky. Spill. But do it in my bedroom so I can pack. Tony followed McKenna as she began to throw things into her bag. So, yeah, the dragon walking out of a big shiny portal was a bit of a surprise, but nothing like the fact that I recognized him. What? McKenna looked up, trying to separate dirty and clean clothes. She hadn't even had a shower yet. All my life, I dreamed of dragons. Both as humanoid and on all fours. Honestly, when I shifted, I was surprised I didn't turn into a dragon. But who tells people that stuff? I just pushed it away and focused on being a kid, then being an adult, then a mom. It was silly dreams, and not like I had them every night. Tony shrugged as she grabbed stuff out of the closet. I'd almost forgotten them, and I haven't had them for years. The dreams on the ship pushed them to the side, I guess. So when he walked out, I almost choked. What do you think it means? No clue. Other than me being weird? But really, there are only so many ways dragons can look. I doubt I dreamed about him specifically. Probably just a weird parallel thing. I mean, a dragon and aliens and shifters. She trailed off as she said that, and McKenna looked at her sideways. Personally, I think it would be stranger at this point if they weren't linked. Besides, he keeps looking at you funny also, as if he knows you. Tony groaned. Oh, I hate it when you're right. She looked around. That looks like everything. They could hear the people clearing out. I'll talk to him later. If we survive, it might matter. Now, I'll try to quit freaking out every time I see him. But he looks wrong without the wings. McKenna grinned. Agreed. But still, it was getting a bit claustrophobic with them. He uses them the way I use my tail in both my forms. That he does. Anything else? Everyone good? Everyone got everything? She asked, checking with everyone.
Finishing up the last of the kitchen stuff now. The place will be a bit of a mess, but we don't have time to clean it,
Cass said.
Yeah, they have another vehicle on the way, and we have the Suburban, the car that was here, and the one Burby's crew came in. We're leaving all the bags in the garage, and they'll collect them for us. The kids are already in the car. It's the only one with booster seats for the three of them. So we just need to know where we're going.
Perce had his steady, everything will be fine cadence to his voice, and it made her feel a bit better. McKenna cast a glance to Tony, who shrugged. They grabbed their bags and headed downstairs. Rowers stood in the living room, out of sight of any person who might be passing by. Philip was giving Rowers a considering look, then frowned at Perce and JD.
Is there an issue? All of you are huge and not inconspicuous, and I really don't want anyone to know we have you here. You don't look like a Kaylid, even without the wings.
He glanced back at Perce and JD.
Very noticeable, especially among a bunch of humans.
Hey, we're human too. McKenna couldn't stop the snappish response. Roberts snapped to attention.
Yes, ma'am. I didn't mean to imply you weren't, ma'am. Just that you are obvious.
He stood not looking at her, his eyes over her shoulder. McKenna sighed. I know, but all of us can change back to human. We'll just need food to replenish the energy. Perce, JD, you okay to change? You have enough reserves for a shift? They both stood there a minute, then nodded.
Yeah. Not going to say I won't need calories to change back. I'm still underweight, but should be fine,
JD said, shrugging one shoulder. All of you?
Wait. Rowers can change too?
Philip had lost the rigid attention pose. Yes. The wings were just too much in that small space. McKenna frowned, then remembered that Rowers had changed before the men got there for the awe factor. Rowers, however, was looking back and forth between them.
Why are you worried about caloric intake? Do you not store spare mass in your quantum spaces?
With his brow ridges furrowed, McKenna figured that was his equivalent of a confused face. I wonder if all species in humanoid forms have similar expressions. And what the heck is he talking about? Before she could voice that, Perce did.
Oh, what are you talking about, quantum space? Storing mass?
Rowers paused, his head moving from one to another, looking at them.
Pardon the intrusion, but how do you change now?
McKenna tilted her head, now totally confused. We have nanobots that do it, and they burn calories to fuel themselves to restructure our cellular structure. The Drakyn blinked at them, both sets of eyelids closing and opening rapidly.
That is horribly inefficient and a waste of caloric energy. Why would you do it like that?
His voice sounded astonished, and McKenna laughed. You think we have a choice? We didn't have a choice in any of this. All we can do is deal with what we've been handed. She paused, looking at him. Are you saying there's a different way to do this? This isn't how you do it. He opened and closed his mouth 2 times in a row before finally responding.
I apologize. I must think about this. I do not know how to deal with this information and what it implies, much less how to explain to you. Give me some time.
Philip looked at them. Okay, if that's done, can all of you shift and get back to something no one will look at twice? Besides, I'll need the shifting later to help impress people.
As long as you have food there to fuel our shift back, it really isn't an issue,
JD offered, and Perce nodded. I'll make a note, please. The gunny actually asked, not ordered. Points for him. Her friend shrugged and started to change, flowing back into human, looking grimy and tired.
Interesting. Yes, much to consider.
Rowers watched all of this with sharp eyes. Then he, too, let himself change. Once again, McKenna noted that he felt different when he shifted. But she couldn't say what felt different. Just that it wasn't like watching or feeling any of hers shift. It felt smoother, like silk against skin. And then a man, dark-haired and powerful, but so undeniably human, stood in front of them.
How do you know our form so well? Or is it that easy for you to change?
Cass asked from the doorway, as Blair Lewis stood next to her, the curiosity in their eyes matching pairs.
I have practiced since my majority. The dreams I shared with Tonan Diaz gave me the templates to change into in my later years.
Tony sucked in a sharp breath at her full name, and Rowers looked at her.
We should talk later, once your world is safe.
His words rang deeper and wider than should have been possible, ringing like a bell in McKenna's soul. Yeah, was all Tony said as she turned and headed out the door, not looking at anyone.